The dark liquid always forces it back, a relentless tide against the dirt wall. You can feel the impression forming, the dread cresting before the plunge. Stay on watch.
What happened next left an everlasting impression on him. It reminded him that there were still a lot of things in this world that were unknown. As Dr. Mo roared, the 7 sinister blades embedded in his body started to tremble. A buzzing sound was emitted from the demonic heads of the blades, getting louder and more acute by the second, as if they were coming to life. As Dr. Mo witnessed the sinister blades vibrating, he mumbled something fervently. Han Li could not catch what he said, but he knew that it could not be anything good. Dr. Mo stood up, circled around the room, and finally stamped his foot in anger. He reluctantly raised his index finger and stuffed it into the mouth of one of the demonic heads. An incredible and inconceivable thing happened. That demonic head that was supposedly dead actually opened its mouth and chomped down on Dr. Mo's index finger, as if it was enjoying some heavenly delicacy. Dr. Mo's body slightly shuddered, as if he was forcibly suppressing the intense pain. Because of the black fog that was obscuring his features, Han Li could not see Dr. Mo's expression, but he guessed that surely it would be hideous. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the hunger of the demonic head was finally sated. Satisfied, it opened, its mouth to release the finger, while the buzzing sound started to abate. Next, Dr. Mo began to feed each of the demonic heads in succession before unwillingly withdrawing his finger. After completing this, Dr. Mo resumed the lotus hand gesture from before, mumbling the spell's incantation and shouting out, "7 ghost devouring the soul." This time, the 7 sinister blades did not start vibrating. Strangely enough, it seemed that nothing inconceivable was going to happen. However, the eyes of the demonic heads all shot open at the same instant, revealing pairs of blood-red eyeballs. Together with their mouths that were stretched wide open, they appeared to be trying, in futility, to suck something from the air. The ghostly mist on Dr. Mo's face began to convulse and expand, as if it could sense the danger of an imminent threat. The movements of the tentacles got increasingly intensive and violent, but to no avail. 7 extremely fine lines of black threads appeared on the top of the ghostly mist, weaving beautiful arcs in the air. Following an unseen energy, the lines of black thread accurately seeked out and were devoured by the mouths of the demonic heads that appeared to be eagerly waiting. Han Li stared in shocked silence. All that transpired occurred right in front of him. So the details of every action by the ghostly mist and demonic heads, however minute, were deeply engraved in his mind. He was so close that when the mouths of the demonic head was stretched open, he could even see their teeth clearly. It was the first time that Han Li had such close proximity contact with the mysterious energies from another plane of existence. He was awed and stunned by the feeling. The demonic heads of the strange, sinister blades, as well as the ghostly mist on Dr. Mo's face, emanated out a heavy demonic air. This phenomenon could not be explained by common sense. In the past, Han Li had never believed in matters of the supernatural. If it were not for him personally experiencing this today, he would absolutely never have believed in it. Yet, how could Han Li not be unnerved? Elements of stories from myths and legends were actually happening in front of his very own eyes. At this moment, the state of Han Li's mind was in turmoil. Knowing that he was the target, Han Li was unsure of how should he react in the face of this extremely bizarre, inhumane power. Gradually, the ghostly mist on Dr. Mo's face slowly started to dissipate. The volume of the mist visibly thinned as the demonic heads devoured it, leaving behind a final layer of darkness and resulting in a faint shadow that clinged onto Dr. Mo's face. As the mist faded, the facial features of Dr. Mo slowly began to be visible, but the moment Han Li saw the face of Dr. Mo, he was thunderstruck, gawking like a retard. There was too many things that left him astonished today. However, all the things that had happened before were diminished by what he saw now. The exposed facial features belonged to a man about 30 years old in the prime of his life. If one observed for a longer period of time, he or she could tell unquestionably that this was Dr. Mo. He had managed to recover at least a few decades of his vitality. A face with a trace of heroic air, eyes that belied with dazzling charm, and a cold smile on his lips. No matter how you look at it, it was a face full of charisma, the face of an extremely handsome man. Deeply alluring and bewitching, it was a face destined to be a lady killer. Regardless of young virgin girls or old sultry cougars, no females could defend against this sort of charm. At the slightest flick of his finger, as long as he desired it, there would certainly be females delivering themselves to his embrace, unable to extricate themselves from the river of love and obsession. After witnessing Dr. Mo's face, Han Li actually felt like there was someone grinding his heartstrings, smashing his heart to pieces. It appeared that this pretty boy countenance was greatly capable of arousing jealousy in other males. As the last remnants of the ghostly mist was devoured by the demonic heads, Han Li suddenly remembered that Dr. Mo had told him before that he was only 30 years of age. It was only because of an accident during the recovery of a grievous injury, which drained away his vitality, did he become old and decrepit. From the looks of it, at the very least up to this point, Dr. Mo did not lie to him. This should be Dr. Mo's original face. It was just that the methods Dr. Mo used to restore his looks was too mysterious and unfathomable. At this moment, Han Li realized that alongside Dr. Mo's features regaining their youthful look, his body, and even his hair all underwent miraculous transformations. That jet-black hair, that sturdy body, without a shadow of a doubt it was certain that the physical energy of Dr. Mo had been rejuvenated to the pinnacle stage of his youth.
But since Dr. Mo had a way to recover his vitality, why would he still go all out to capture me?
Han Li questioned himself. Regarding this, Han Li had his suspicions. After he recovered from the shock, he realized that he was still in immense danger. Neurons started firing rapidly in his brain, repeatedly analyzing everything and hoping to find a path of escape. From Han Li's perspective, it appeared that Dr. Mo had been struck dumb. Dr. Mo was just standing there in silence. After some time had passed, he finally raised his hand. Using an expression that was akin to looking at a precious newborn baby, Dr. Mo attentively studied his new, shiny and velvety skin. After examining himself, he slowly closed his eyes, propping his chin against both of his palms and gently caressing it, as if he were enjoying the long bygone feeling of youth. Looking at the narcissism that clouded Dr. Mo's features, Han Li felt like vomiting. He could not grasp what Dr. Mo was feeling right now, that intoxicating feeling of recovered vitality.
Old man Mo, looks like you have fully regained your vitality. Let me congratulate you first. It seems that you no longer require Disciple's help, so could you possibly let Disciple off the hook? No matter what issues you have in the future, your Disciple would help you without question.
Han Li was running out of patience. Up to now, he was still unsure of what methods Dr. Mo was going to utilize to deal with him. Han Li pretended to be ignorant and questioned Dr. Mo, hoping to know his fate before making any decisions.
Han Li, you are really flexible, knowing when to make compromises and concessions. However, letting you go, do you think it's even possible?
Dr. Mo sneered. Han Li was shocked at the sound of Dr. Mo's voice. When Dr. Mo spoke, his voice contained faint traces of charisma. Anyone who listened a sense of attraction and contentment. Compared to his previously bitter and insipid voice, this was totally different. It appeared that in comparison to his current looks, the beauty of his voice was not any worse off. Surprisingly, this was the first time Dr. Mo ever called Han Li by his name. Although it does not mean anything much, it allowed Han Li to feel slightly appreciated, as it was much better than being called little brat every single time. On the surface, one could not really sense any imperfections from the current Dr. Mo. Every single one of his movements was graceful beyond comparison. A handsome man indeed. There was no trace of the senile old geezer from back then. Han Li was sure that back in his youth, Dr. Mo relied on that face of his to dazzle countless females.
So what on earth do you intend to do to me? Just tell me directly.
Han Li was not a female, and thus he was not affected by Dr. Mo's handsome face. Furthermore, Han Li could tell from the previous conversation that Dr. Mo seemed to have no intentions of sparing him, and as such, there was no need for Han Li to leave him with any pretense of cordiality.
What do I intend to do? Ha ha ha.
Dr. Mo leisurely stretched his recently revitalized body, coldly smiling without any intent to answer Han Li while taking out another unknown object. The unknown object was revealed to be a small holding pouch made from extremely fine silk. The glow reflected off of the silk was extremely radiant, just like the blazing flames of a phoenix. It was extremely eye-catching. Furthermore, the embroidery was exceptionally exquisite. One could certainly tell that this was no ordinary object. What could this small holding pouch contain? Could it be another bizarre artifact, just like the sinister blades from before? Asking himself these questions, Han Li felt curiosity grow within his heart. Dr. Mo cut Han Li's silent speculations short by quickly opening the pouch of holding. Following this, he cautiously drew out a rumpled piece of yellow paper. Han Li was somewhat disappointed. However, he knew that the more ordinary-looking an item is, the more difficult would it be for him to anticipate its uses. Caution arose in his heart as he became extremely focused. thinking back to the incomprehensible events that happened earlier and seeing this seemingly ordinary piece of yellow paper. Han Li was sure that there were bound to be countless enigmatic mysteries behind it. Dr. Mo gently held the piece of wrinkled paper between two of his fingers, carefully smoothing it with a serious demeanor. Han Li was now able to see that the piece of paper was not large, about the size of a palm and yellowish with a hint of mold, giving the appearance that this talisman had been created many years ago. The most noticeable thing was that the piece of paper was shining with a silvery light, materializing silvery wisps of lines in the air. The lines slowly formed into many strange symbols in the air. Han Li had absolutely no knowledge of these foreign symbols. The moment he saw them, however, his heart started to feel as if there were an unfathomable and mysterious energy pulsing within the floating symbols. Even the qi he obtained from the eternal spring arts was moving in his body erratically, as if it sensed immense danger, leaving Han Li stupefied. Sensing that something was wrong, Han Li quickly focused all his attention on the strange symbols, hoping to understand the mysteries behind them. The symbols twisted here and curved there, zigzagging around the air, yet there seemed to be something miraculous hidden within the strangely shaped symbols that he was unable to grasp. It was a pity that there was insufficient time for him to figure them out. In this instance, Dr. Mo arrived in front of Han Li, when he saw Han Li concentrating exclusively on the yellow paper in his hand, almost to the point of being obsessed. A slight hint of mercy involuntarily flashed in his eyes. He gently lowered his head, moved his lips close to Han Li's ears, and slowly said in an extremely low-pitched voice,
Don't blame me, Han Li. I am also left with no choice, so you best willingly submit to your fate and await reincarnation. I am going to take over your shell of a body now.
What did you just say? What is the meaning of this?
Han Li was shocked awake by Dr. Mo's words. He was so terrified by them, to the point where his soul almost scattered and flew out of his body. He could sense that a fate worse than death will happen to him momentarily. Han Li no longer cared about the threat of the giant fellow behind him and fiercely struggled for his life. Hidden within his clothes, he still had a few items that may prove helpful in creating a distraction, thereby giving him a path of escape.
Iron slave, suppress him fully. Don't even give him the chance to flail about.
Dr. Mo's orders destroyed his last chance for freedom. Two gigantic palms, akin to small mountains, were securely pressing him down, not giving him a chance to move. Rivulets of sweat flowed down Han Li's face all the way down to the ground. He opened his eyes wide, gritted his teeth, and listened to Dr. Mo's incomprehensible muttering. Once Dr. Mo began chanting, the piece of yellow paper wedged between Dr. Mo's finger started to flutter intensively at the sound of the spell incantation despite the lack of wind. Meanwhile, the silver symbols in the air started to shine with a mysterious silvery glow. Even though Han Li's movements were sealed, he was still clear-headed. He understood that the mysterious silvery glow signified that Dr. Mo was about to make his move. Dr. Mo looked solemnly at the talisman, and when the last of the symbols glowed with that mysterious silvery light, he roared in delight. Using various special methods, he waved the yellow paper wildly in the air, writing the word for
Seal. After the word.
Seal was completed. A thunderclap noise rumbled out.
At the same time, the talisman was pressed firmly onto Han Li's forehead, staunchly sticking there. As the talisman came into contact with his forehead, Han Li lost control of his bodily functions. He couldn't even blink. Despite this, he was still able to see with his eyes and hear with his ears. He was currently the same as a normal human, unable to circulate his internal energy, akin to a walking zombie. This type of feeling was totally different from that of his acupoints being sealed. After one's acupoints are sealed, although one could not move, they are still able to feel numbness and itchiness. The current Han Li, however, was not able to feel anything. Waves of terror assaulted Han Li. He did not know how Dr. Mo was going to control his body and steal his identity. Was this considered a successful attempt?
Don't rush. Your body should still be able to sustain this state for a little while longer.
Dr. Mo muttered, although Han Li was unsure about whether he was talking to Han Li or to himself.
You truly are quite cunning. If you were left to your own devices, even I would have some difficulty dealing with you.
Dr. Mo spoke in a calm and unhurried tone as he lifted Han Li and carried him outside of the house. It was still very hot outside, which made Han Li realize that although he thought he had been in the house for a long time, the events had lasted shorter than he expected. Dr. Mo continued to effortlessly carry Han Li as if he were a weightless object, walking at a leisure pace until he passed the medicine garden and came upon a remote cliffside. The silent giant continued to follow Dr. Mo's footsteps, refusing to leave his side almost as if he were his shadow. Through his own eyes, Han Li was able to see that there was more to the cliff than met the eyes. Upon closer inspection, he realized that carved into the cliff was a stone room he had never seen before. This room was similar to the stone room Han Li had cultivated in before, but this stone room was covered with a layer of lime wash. From its rough appearance, Han Li judged that the room was constructed recently. He was certain that he would be able to smell the pungent smell from the lime wash. Afraid that somebody might come along and disrupt his plan, Dr. Mo ordered the giant.
Iron slave, stay outside and stand guard. If you see anyone near the house, kill on sight.
He then easily opened the door and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His familiarity with the layout of the room suggested that Dr. Mo built this place himself. Han Li assumed that with the door tightly shut and closed windows, the room would be pitched black. But contrary to his belief, the room was filled with candles of many different shapes and sizes that were brightly illuminating the room to the point where it seemed as bright as the outside daylight. The room left Han Li speechless, but even if he wanted to say something, he was unable to control his body. Since he could not control his body, Han Li had no choice but to examine the interior of the room. He noticed a strange pattern in the center of the room. It seemed to be made of some sort of powder, but Han Li was unable to get closer look. At the edge of the strange pattern were fist-sized pieces of jade that glowed in the candlelight. With a glance, it was obvious that each piece of jade was a rare and priceless item. If an expert on precious stones were to see such priceless treasures set on the ground, he would feel such an immense heartache that he would be unable to sleep for several nights. At this time, Han Li felt his body being roughly thrown by Dr. Mo. His body made a
Putong sound as he crashed into the center of the pattern with his body facing upwards.
Unable to move his body, he could only capable of staring at the ceiling. To say the least, Han Li was extremely anxious from being unable to anything in his current situation. The fact that he failed to see any of Dr. Mo's actions made him unable to calm down and heightened his fear. The only consolation he had was that he was not facing the ground, or else he would have been unable to even look at the ceiling. Poo poo poo, sound of puffing. A string of strange sounds heightened Han Li's fear and confusion. But he soon realized that it was the sound of Dr. Mo blowing out several candles. Gradually, the room became dimmed. Han Li did not know the purpose of this action, but he did not have much time to ponder on its meaning since Dr. Mo suddenly opened his mouth and said,
The method you mentioned, will it really work? Well, I'm betting everything on it.
This caused Han Li to be bewildered, as he did not know if he was the one being spoken to. There were only two people in this room, him and Dr. Mo, so who else could he be talking to?
Did Dr. Mo forget about the cursed yellow paper that prevented him from speaking?
I guarantee it will work. After all, how could the 7 ghost technique that I passed on to you be fake?
A new voice suddenly replied, seemingly out of nowhere. At this point, Han Li was beyond being surprised at the sudden appearance of a new character, because all the strange things he experienced in the past few hours far exceeded the amount of strange things he heard in the past few years. Instead of being astonished, Han Li calmly deduced from the sound of the man's voice that he must be a young adult around the age of 20.
Heng, what's the point if it ends up failing halfway?
Right afterwards, Dr. Mo released out a string of curses, which caused no amount of shock to Han Li. This type of vulgarity was nothing special coming from Dr. Mo, but his sudden transformation into a pretty boy made his dirty words seem out of place, allowing Han Li to feel a hint of sardonic pleasure in his pitiful situation.
If you suddenly pull a trick at the end and make me fall into your trap, who am I to turn to then?
Not waiting for the young voice's reply, Dr. Mo continued on with a self-preserving tone.
I don't want to hear your useless guarantees. I know you are already dead since I was the one who killed you. How could you not hold bitter hatred for me and try to look for any opportunity to gain revenge? Do you think you can deceive me?
Not giving the other person any chance to refute him, Dr. Mo kept talking almost as if he were taking this chance to pour out all his pent-up thoughts and insecurities. The mysterious man did not react to Dr. Mo's spiel. As a result, the only audible sound within the penetrative silence of the stone room was Dr. Mo's breathing. Han Li couldn't help but break out into a cold sweat as he finally processed the fact that the mysterious young man was deceased.
That would make him some sort of ghost, would it not?
Also, from what Dr. Mo revealed in his tirade, it seemed that the weird technique he just used was learned from the man he had killed. the mysterious man finally replied angrily.
Well, what else do you want me to do? I already swore on my ancestors, my parents, my whole family, and even on my family name. Are you still not satisfied?
Hearing this, Han Li couldn't help but feel his heart jump a beat as he realized that the mysterious man was so perverse and demented that he would swear on so many of his family members just to gain Dr. Mo's trust. At first he felt a sense of connection, as they both seemed to be in dire straits, but that feeling quickly disappeared from Han Li's mind.
You're right. You can't do anything to me right now since your body has been destroyed, leaving behind your soul. You can't even see the light of day, and what little strength you have left is useless against me.
Dr. Mo said in a slow and deliberate manner in order to maintain his facade.
Yu Zhitong, I just want to remind you again that if anything happened to me, you won't be any better off. You know that your soul won't last long in its current state, and that you depend on me to help you look for a new body. So if there is anything you want to say it now while there is still time. I will not be angry unless it turns out you failed to tell me some crucial knowledge,
said Dr. Mo, as he was unwilling to give up any attempts at trying to pry out hidden information from the mysterious youth. From these words, it becomes evident to Han Li that Dr. Mo was in fact very afraid of Yu Zhiyong doing something at the final moment that would cause his downfall, and was looking for more reassurance that his plans have not been tampered with. In response to Dr. Mo's words, Yu Zhitong, who fully understood the risks involved with harming Dr. Mo, replied smoothly.
There is no point in me tampering with your plans, and if I do, then may my family suffer heaven's retribution. Besides, after using the seven-soul devouring technique, at the price of your fundamental essence, you would temporarily receive a certain amount of magic power, enabling to use a few simple spells. But your existence now is currently that of a soul. Once your fundamental essence is used up, are you sure you could still execute such a spell?
After Yu Zhitong swore a venomous oath against harming Dr. Mo, he prodded at his weaknesses and leaving no way for Dr. Mo to back out. Although Han Li wasn't religious, listening to their dialogue made Han Li pray silently to the heavens that Dr. Mo would give up his evil plans. It seems like a ridiculous thing to do, but it was the only thing he could do.
Okay. I will use what I trust and ignore what I don't. Since there are such great benefits, it is only natural that there would be some risks,
said Dr. Mo after making up his mind. Hearing this, Yu Zhitong seemed quite happy, and excitement appeared in his words.
See, that is the correct mindset. Think about it. You were originally a mere mortal without spiritual roots, unable to step onto the path of immortality. But if this plan becomes a success, that will no longer be the case.
With your new body and powerful spiritual foundation, any large sect or clan would beg for you to join. Not only that, your body would be immune to sickness and death, allowing you to live 5 times as long as a normal mortal.
Haha. Then I will trust you on this matter. Do not worry, I, Mo Jurin, am a man of my words. What I say will most definitely be done. Once I am successful in this endeavor, I will immediately help you find a suitable body with a strong spiritual foundation. I promise you that I won't let you down, little brother Yu.
After listening to Yu Zhitong's promises, Dr. Mo's initial worry was gone as he took up a kinder tone, addressing Yu Zhitong with close familiarity.
Then, if that is the case, I thank Big Brother Mo. After your success, I will single-handedly teach you each and every one of the cultivation techniques I have in my possession,
said the cunning Yu Zhitong. He knew he had successfully lured in Mo Jurin with his words. Han Li listened as the two shamelessly talked about using his body without asking for his opinions. Even though he realized that he wasn't able to do anything given his current situation, he couldn't help but feel annoyed at how they don't give him any face. Once Dr. Mo dispelled his doubts and made up his decision to follow through with the plan, he no longer delayed, immediately pulling out some golden needles and stabbed them into his Mixu acupuncture point located in the back of his head. He was immediately invigorated, his body filled with enough energy to perform the next step of his plan and increase his chances of success. He strode to where Han Li lay, sat him upright into a meditating position, and then proceeded to sit in front of Han Li with his arms crossed over his chest, tightly hugging his shoulders. Then, Dr. Mo executed a celestial technique. With a wave of his hand, a red beam of light shot out from his palms and hit the pattern that was laid out underneath Han Li, causing the jades placed around the perimeter of the diagram to glow. Dr. Mo proceeded to whisper the spell incantation that held an enchanting and bewildering effect, causing those who heard it to feel drowsy. As the chant continued, Han Li felt a deep sense of weariness, causing everything to become a blur as he slowly lost consciousness.
Not good.
Thought Han Li, knowing fully well that this was the intended effect of the mysterious chant, and that once he fell unconscious, his body would be possessed. Holding on to this thought, Han Li resisted the temptation to sleep. Thoughts of biting his tongue and pinching himself were quickly disregarded as he was not in control of his body, so in the end, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to fight off the effects of the spell and fell to a deep slumber. Right before he fell unconscious, the last image he saw was the handsome face of Dr. Mo. At that moment, however, Dr. Mo looked more like an ugly devil than a handsome figure. The last words Han Li wanted to say to Dr. Mo was,
"Your ugliness suits you."
Within the endless darkness of his subconscious, Han Li dreamt a very strange dream. In his dream, he was a fist-sized globe of green light that was happy and free in his own little world. But not long after, a thumb-sized yellow globe carrying an evil intent suddenly invaded his dream. Upon seeing the green globe, the yellow ball of light aggressively charged at the green globe of light, suddenly revealing its mouth to bite down upon the green globe that was Han Li. Of course, Han Li was not weak, and he also opened his mouth to retaliate. After just a few exchanges, Han Li easily ended the battle by swallowing the yellow globe of light. The victorious Han Li rejoiced in his victory, but soon enough another intruder entered his subconscious. This foreign entity was also a green globe of light that was many more times the size of Han Li, but it did not contain the same glow and luster of Han Li's globe of light. When the enemy saw Han Li's globe of light, it was shocked. Hesitation appeared on its features. After Han Li experienced the amazing taste of devouring other globes of light, the sight of a new enemy did not cause Han Li to give much thought to his opponent's power, as he charged right at his enemy with the intent of devouring him. The enemy, seeing Han Li's attack, reluctantly chose to charge forward and engage in battle. Even though the opponent was many times bigger than Han Li, its attacks were only slightly stronger than the yellow globe of light Han Li recently devoured. Upon realizing its disadvantage, the invader tried to turn and escape, but Han Li was unwilling to let it leave so easily and gave chase, biting at the fleeing invader. The invader was very tricky and slippery. Every time Han Li seemed to have caught it, the green globe would cut off the part that was caught and continue to flee. In the end, the invader managed to flee, but its body mass was 1/3 its original size. Although Han Li was reluctant to let his opponent go, there was nothing he could do about the matter, and so decided to wait around for more enemies to invade so that he could also devour them. Sadly, no more globes of light came, and he continued to float around. When Han Li became clear-headed, the first thing he felt was an immense pressure in his head, followed by waves of pain across his entire body. He felt indescribably weak, as one would feel at the onset of a serious illness, and he was unable to open his heavy eyelids no matter how much effort he expended. Still feeling a bit dazed, Han Li managed to recall the events that occurred right before he passed out. Han Li was struggling for control over his body when an immediate sense of panic flashed through Han Li's mind, causing adrenaline to flood through him, sharpening his befuddled mind and allowing him to quickly assess the situation around him.
He
He exclaimed in shock as he realized that his mind had not been taken over by Dr. Mo. True, he could barely move his eyelids, not to mention the rest of his body, but the waves of pain spreading throughout his body told him clearly that he had regained control over his own body, and that Dr. Mo had failed in his plans.
Why did Dr. Mo's plan fail? Did he do something wrong?
Filled with surprise, Han Li was able to think of one plausible explanation for his current situation, barely containing the excitement within his heart. Han Li patiently waited for his body to regain some of its energy before he tried once more to open his eyes. After a short but strenuous battle, he managed to crack open his eyelids to see what was going on around him. The first image he saw when he opened his mind was the sorry state Dr. Mo was in. His hair was all white, his face was thin, wrinkled and haggard. It seemed like he was at least 10 years older than he was before his youthful transformation. With this appearance, it was impossible to imagine him any older. His features seemed to embody the meaning of the word old, and he was now simply a poor old man. In front of Han Li, Dr. Mo's eyes were wide open as he stared at Han Li with a look of unbridled terror. Han Li himself was equally shocked, and his muscles immediately tensed. All sense of weakness left his body as the only thought that rang out within him was to make the first move and gain the upper hand. Clearly learning from his previous lesson, Han Li was unwilling to once again fall under someone else's control. But afterwards, Han Li realized something strange. His opponent's face seemed to be frozen in fear, and there was no sign of breathing from Dr. Mo. It became apparent that he was dead, and may have been dead for quite a while now. Unwilling to let down his guard, Han Li continued to stare deeply, with eyebrows furrowed, at Dr. Mo's facial features in search of anything that might give him away. After a whole 30 minutes of careful scrutiny, Han Li was forced to admit that Dr. Mo was indeed dead, for he did not hold any resemblance to that of someone who was still alive. Hesitating, Han Li carefully crawled up to him and stretched out one hand to grasp Dr. Mo's wrist, while his other hand was placed under his nose. In this position, he waited for a while, but there was still no reaction. It was only with this final affirmation of Dr. Mo's death that Han Li felt his heart settle and relax. The sense of oppression he had felt in his heart was finally discarded. Until now, Han Li had always carried some doubts within his mind, as he did not believe his biggest enemy, the cunning and crafty Dr. Mo, would die so easily from an unknown cause of death. Han Li scratched his forehead, only to realize that the
soul lock talisman, which had been fixed to his forehead, had disappeared without a trace.
This made Han Li feel strange. He would later learn about talismans and sealing techniques, and only then would he realize what had happened. It seems that all the power in the yellow talisman had been used up, and thus it had disintegrated into dust, so Han Li was unable to find it. The now relaxed Han Li decided to continue being cautious and started to scan the area around Dr. Mo to see if there were any traces of life. Han Li noticed that the candles were still lit, signaling to him that he had not been out for a long time. The jade pieces, on the other hand, had lost all their previous luster and seemed to have been degraded, unable to catch anybody's eyes. Shifting his attention towards the left side corner of the stone room, he focused on an object that had previously evaded Han Li's detection. Han Li was not a stranger to this object. This object was the invading green globe from his dream that had managed to escape from his grasp, but not before having 1/3 of its mass devoured by Han Li. At this time, it desperately tried to dig into the corner of the room, apparently afraid of Han Li and trying its very best to hide from his sight. Amused, Han Li looked at this scene with one hand stroking his chin. Then, he quickly stood up and strode over to the ball of light.
I think we both know each other. You should be Yu Zhitong, am I correct?
The green light, which contained Yu Zhitong, started to tremble and flicker at the sound of Han Li calling its name. But after pausing for a moment, it started to shine brightly again.
You guessed correctly. It seems you truly are Dr. Mo's disciple. You are just like him, tough and hard to deal with, said the ball of light, accepting its fate.
From its voice, Han Li could tell that it really was the young man whom Han Li heard conversing with Dr. Mo. It did not try to hide its identity, and instead confirmed Han Li's thoughts. Now knowing what he was dealing with, Han Li asked,
Since you were one of the culprits trying to take my life and possess my body, shouldn't you provide me with an explanation?
Han Li did not reveal any anger as he talked to the culprit. Instead, he had a rather calm demeanor. Even so, Yu Zhitong, seeing Han Li's indifferent attitude, was at a loss regarding what to do, feeling a sense of dread within his heart. In the recent battle between their two souls, he experienced firsthand Han Li's might and even had a portion of his soul devoured, causing his internal qi to drop by half. The remaining half of his internal qi could only be used to perform minor incantations that had neither the power to kill Han Li nor the power to protect himself, allowing a sense of fear to ingrain itself within his heart.
What do you want to know?
He knew that Han Li had recently escaped from a life-threatening situation and therefore would not be emotionally stable. Although he may look calm and collected, who knows how he was truly feeling? In a sense, he was comparable to a volcano about to erupt, as no one is able to accurately predict a dormant volcano's destructive power. Caught, Yu Zhitong's best option for him was to comply with all of Han Li's demands without testing his patiences with riddles or trickery. The last thing he wanted was to anger Han Li and suffer from his rash actions.
I want you to honestly tell me everything concerning what you are and exactly how you came to know Dr. Mo. Right now, the only resource I have in my disposal is time, so I will listen to all you have to say.
As he spoke, Han Li seemed to be wearing a mask, his face hiding all emotional fluctuations from Yu Zhitong's wary perception.
Keck. Speaking of which, I am also a victim.
The moment he opened his mouth to speak, Yu Zhitong tried to get Han Li's sympathy, doing his best to downplay the relationship between him and Dr. Mo, even to the point of breaking all ties. However, his act was in vain. Han Li was not moved at all. Without much of an option, Yu Zhitong had no choice but to continue explaining.
Originally, I was an immortal cultivator.
Yu Zhitong honestly told Han Li about his history, explaining every details about the circumstances from how he got to know Dr. Mo to how he ended up in his current state. Of course, in his tale, he made himself out to be the victim in the story, pushing all responsibilities and negative connotations on to the head of the dead Dr. Mo. After all, dead men tell no tales. Han Li naturally would not completely believe what he had said. But comparing the story he just heard alongside with Dr. Mo's words back when he was still alive, Han Li deduced that about 70–80% of the story he just heard was true. It was highly improbable, but not totally impossible for the circumstances to occur as they had. After removing parts of the story that seemed inconceivable, Han Li already had a rough understanding of the truth. From what Han Li understood regarding his past, Dr. Mo had no reason to lie to him. The stories he heard from Dr. Mo, that he got ambushed and decided to search for ways to regain his original powers and appearance, should be true. There was no need for Dr. Mo to lie to him about that. However, Han Li recalled that Dr. Mo told him earlier that he discovered a mysterious book that outlined a way to regain his vitality. After considering all that transpired, Han Li decided that the story was false, because it does not match with what Yu Zhitong had said. Ultimately, Doctor managed to regain his youth because of Yu Zhitong. Yet, he was also cursed because of Yu Zhitong. Originally, Yu Zhitong was a member of a cultivation clan. He had managed to cultivate the Eternal Spring arts to the 7th level. It could be said that he had some expertise, but ultimately, because of his limited talent, he made no advancement in the Eternal Sprint arts and thus was unable to meet the requirements to enter the Foundation Establishment stage. Cultivators who were not at the Foundation Establishment stage could not be considered cultivators at all. At most, they could only be considered powerful mortals, halfway to the point of stepping into the realm of immortal cultivators. Because Yu Zhitong was unable to achieve a breakthrough, he decided to explore the secular world for enlightenment, hoping to make a breakthrough in his state of heart, overcoming the bottleneck that forbade him from reaching Foundation Establishment stage. Of course, he hoped that he would be able to come across rare precious herbs so that he could concoct spiritual pills to aid him in his cultivation. However, he knew that the chance was slim at best. After all, it was only a matter of luck. With high hopes and expectations in his head, the 20-year-old Yu Zhitong arrived at the place cultivators called the secular world. The captivating world out there was full of wondrous events and distractions, causing Yu Zhitong to be dazzled and lost in their splendor. His original state of mind could not be regarded as solidly stable. In less than a few years, it had already degraded. He became nothing more than an influential clan's honored guest and began to enjoy the world's luxurious splendors. As a result, his immortal's heart had gradually weakened. Regarding traitors of the clan, after 100 years, disciples like Yu Zhitong would have their names formally removed from the clan registry. The act of doing so was equivalent to declaring that the traitorous disciples would have no more connections to the clan and would be considered immortal. Disciples like Yu Zhitong would never be able to return to the clan. Unless one of his direct descendants had an enormous potential to walk the path of an immortal cultivator, he would not be allowed to return. If this carried on, Yu Zhitong would have lost the chance to cultivate, but living a life of decadence and wallowing in riches would still be highly possible. This was an extremely common occurrence for cultivators who failed to break through to the stage of Foundation Establishment, so there was nothing to make a fuss of. One day, it was unknown whether the heavens were helping him or if Lady Luck decided to smile on him. But as Yu Zhitong was strolling the streets of the city, he decided to enter a spiritual pharmacy on a whim. To his surprise, he actually spotted a rarely seen and extremely beneficial spiritual herb there. The name of the spiritual herb was known as the
Blood spirit grass.
For those who were not familiar with herbs, it was extremely common for them not to recognize this, since the external appearance of this grass was about 95% similar to the
Blood sweat grass.
Who knew that the ignorant shopkeeper would actually place the two grasses together? Yu Zhitong was naturally exulted as he saw the
Blood spirit grass.
With this spiritual herb, it would greatly increase his chances of breaking through the bottleneck. Ingesting the spiritual herb was akin to fanning flames. The sparks in his immortal's heart gradually started to blaze again. Who would have known that just when he was about to purchase the herb, another immortal cultivator also entered the shop? Seeing such a beneficial spiritual herb in front of him, he fought with Yu Zhitong over the purchase of the spirit blood grass. Seeing this situation, the shop owner offered them a solution. The herb would be sold to the one who offered the highest bid. Eventually, Yu Zhitong managed to win the bidding war by a narrow margin. After winning, he hurriedly left the store. He knew that the other cultivator would not give up so easily. Yu Zhitong was in a panic and decided that returning to his clan was the safest way to proceed. But halfway on the road, the other cultivator caught up to him and a huge battle began. The other cultivator was stronger than him, and thus Yu Zhitong ended up suffering a miserable defeat. Yet he was still unwilling to relinquish the spiritual herb. Gritting his teeth, Yu Zhitong decided to use his last resort. He took out his only remaining treasure bestowed on him by his clan, putting on a deceptively brave front by showing a fake intent to perish together with his opponent. This way, Yu Zhitong managed to scare the other cultivator away. Even though he had achieved victory, the current him was riddled with injuries. It was at this moment where he met Dr. Mo, who had also been trying to find a remedy for himself. With his lack of experience, Yu Zhitong did not know the saying that human hearts are tough to fathom, and he stupidly revealed the fact that he was carrying an extremely beneficial spiritual herb. Just like that, Yu Zhitong invited a calamity upon himself. He did not know that Dr. Mo was desperately searching for a cure for his own injuries. Now that he knew there might be an efficacious spiritual herb on Yu Zhitong's body, which might have the chance to save him, he exhausted all his methods trying to obtain the herb from Yu Zhitong. However, how could Yu Zhitong agree? He too needed the miraculous effects of the herbs to recover from his injuries. The current him was no different from an ordinary mortal. Seeing that his efforts of negotiation was unsuccessful, hatred formed in his heart. Dr. Mo calmed himself and appeared to accept his fate with a sigh. He was cunning and could afford to wait for a good opportunity. Dr. Mo decided to poison Yu Zhitong to death. In normal circumstances, ordinary poisons would all be ineffective against Yu Zhitong. However, the poison Dr. Mo administered was an unusual poison with no antidote. Already suffering from heavy injuries, Yu Zhitong now had the potent poison to contend with. Struggling with every movement, he appeared to be on the verge of dying. It was at this moment that Dr. Mo revealed himself and walked swaggeringly towards Yu Zhitong. Only now did Yu Zhitong understand what had happened. There was no way he would allow Dr. Mo to succeed just like that. Even in such dire circumstances, he must find a way to persist longer. Under great anger, he had no choice but to utilize the blood-soul curse, transmuting all the blood essence and spiritual energy in his body into a blood curse, spitting it on Dr. Mo's face. After which, Yu Zhitong's soul swiftly departed his body. After his soul departed his body, only did Yu Zhitong realize that he had made a mistake. He had forgotten to prepare a soul-binding treasure, so there was no item that could temporarily house his soul. With no choice, he had to enter Dr. Mo's body. After all, souls without something to tether them would inevitably dissipate. As the blood curse splattered on Dr. Mo's face, he was terrified. But after he calmed down and realized that nothing strange is going to happen, he relaxed his guard and stopped thinking about it. Based on his rudimentary knowledge of medicinal pills, he searched Yu Zhitong's corpse and immediately consumed any pills he could find. As expected, pills from a immortal cultivator were unusually effective. After he consumed the pills, Dr. Mo's internal chi was restored. Dr. Mo laughed crazily and took Yu Zhitong's belongings, including the eternal spring arts, which he could not understand. Before he left, Dr. Mo decided to make a comeback and gain revenge on all his enemies after his injuries recovered. The mortality decimation curse revealed its deadly side effects, causing him to age at the rate of 1 year for every passing day. He was terrified at the rate he was aging and tried everything to find a way to control the abnormal effects of the curse. But there was little to no success. He knew that if this continued on, he would not live for much longer, as his body would begin to fail him, and he would eventually die like any other old man. Yu Zhitong, on the other hand, was in even more pain. When his soul entered Dr. Mo's body, it was slowly but painfully being assimilated into Dr. Mo's soul. Assimilation, a passive event, would occur if one's soul remained in a foreign body for a prolonged period of time. Since one body can contain only one consciousness, the stronger soul would try to subdue the weaker soul, thus beginning the long process of assimilation. Yu Zhitong decided out of desperation to reveal everything he knew concerning why they wanted Han Li's body. He was reluctant to do so, not because he was good at heart loyal to Dr. Mo, but rather because he was fearful of the cultivation world's 3 big inviolable rules. First, cultivators must not forcefully possess the bodies of normal mortals, as they were unable to withstand the immense amount of stress, causing the body to ultimately burn out. Second, only those with greater magic power will be able to successfully overtake the body of a cultivator with weaker magic power and not suffer from any form of counterattack. The greater the disparity between the levels of power, the safer it would be for the one attempting the possession. Third, a cultivator is only able to perform body possession once in his entire life, no matter how powerful their magic power is. If they were to attempt to perform body possession a second time, their soul will perish without fail. Although the number of people who tried to break the 3 rules is unknown, the 3 big inviolable rules have never been broken. These 3 rules limited countless evil cultivators who tried to use the body possession technique and prevented them from creating calamity in the mortal world. The heavens frowned upon actions that go against heaven's will because no matter what, the heavens would not allow cultivators to throw the world into chaos. If Dr. Mo had been a cultivator, Yu Zhitong would not be in his current predicament, as he would have had a viable chance at possessing Dr. Mo's body. But since Dr. Mo was a normal mortal without a hint of spiritual qi, there was no way for Yu Zhitong to possess his body for fear that, halfway through the possession, Dr. Mo's body would be unable to handle the stress and ultimately break down. Even if Yu Zhitong was able to find another body to possess, the process of assimilation was inevitable, and he might fall under a more dire predicament, as every time he leaves and enters a new body, he loses a bit of his spiritual qi, which will quickly be expended. When this happens, Yu Zhitong will no longer be able to enter and exit someone's body at will and may even be indefinitely stuck in someone's body, and ultimately be assimilated. It is also important to note that without a body, he was unable to replenish his magic power through meditation. So every time he used magic power, it was lost forever. At the same time, his magic power also leaked out at a slow but steady pace, and even he didn't know how long his soul could maintain its current form. So, unless Yu Zhitong found a cultivator capable of using small amounts of magic power and had a body capable of withstanding possession, he would not take any risks and leave his current body, which was that of Dr. Mo. Just when Dr. Mo's body was about breakdown because of the blood curse, the aftermath would leave Yu Zhitong's soul without a body to lodge in. After the collapse of Dr. Mo's body under the blood curse, leaving him without a body to return to, and the fact that Han Li may consume his remaining life force, Yu Zhitong decided to temporarily place aside his hatred and give Han Li anything he wanted, even going as far as betraying Dr. Mo, revealing how they met and their plans, along with the stakes and benefits involved, without holding anything back. When Dr. Mo first heard of Yu Zhitong's plan for revitalizing his body, it made him express anger, but he quickly realized that this was a perfect opportunity and quickly pledged to achieve their goal, revealing him to be a man of dignity. First, Dr. Mo must follow Yu Zhitong's instructions and control his consciousness so that it does not assimilate his soul. Yu Zhitong also taught Dr. Mo a few secret techniques that allowed him to slow down the rate of aging he suffered from his curse, while also temporarily allowing him to use magic power. Then Dr. Mo must find someone with strong spiritual roots who was also able to practice the eternal spring arts, teach him the incantation, and then wait for when the time was right before Dr. Mo used his temporarily gained abilities to use magic power to forcefully take over the other person's body in order to start a new life. Dr. Mo's sincere desire to traverse the path of cultivation was ridiculed constantly by Yu Zhitong, since he knew firsthand how impossible it was for normal mortals to use magic power. Dr. Mo was merely a mortal cultivator of the mouth, with no spiritual roots in his body. After Dr. Mo succeeded in overtaking a body with spiritual roots and had sufficient time to rest, he would then proceed to help Yu Zhitong find a suitable body to possess, and then provide any aid to help Yu Zhitong possess his new body. From the conditions above, it seems like Dr. Mo receives the most benefits from this deal, but that couldn't be helped since Yu Zhitong was caught in a bad position with his remaining soul force under constant threat of assimilation. In the end, Yu Zhitong was forced to accept this unfavorable agreement and take a bit of loss. However, it was not clear if he really was taking a loss. After all, the only person who knew the exact terms of the agreement was himself. At one point, Yu Zhitong suggested that Dr. Mo should go back to his family and ask for help, but the rapidly aging man refused to even consider that option, much to Yu Zhitong's constant annoyance. What came afterwards didn't warrant much discussion, as Dr. Mo spent most of his time trying unsuccessfully to look for a suitable body and reluctantly entered the Seven Mysteries sect, where he accepted Han Li as a disciple and taught him the eternal spring arts. The rest that occurred was not worth mentioning, as they were either mentioned by Dr. Mo himself or was experienced by Han Li himself. After Han Li finished hearing those words, he let out a long sigh as some of the confusions and questions within his heart were answered by Yu Zhitong. Seeing how Yu Zhitong did not continue, Han Li's face grew darker and he coldly said,
It seems you still haven't told me how Dr. Mo died. Yu Zhitong hesitantly opened his mouth and said,
Is there else worth explaining?
Dr. Mo underestimated your cultivation speed of the eternal spring arts, and his magic power was not as strong as yours, so therefore he was unable to take over your body, resulting in his soul being devoured.
So, the yellow ball of light that first entered my body was Dr. Mo and the second green ball of light was you.
Han Li stated calmly, almost as if the invasion of his body had not been a big deal.
Well, about this. At that time I thought that both you and Dr. Mo were exhausted, and I did not want to waste this opportunity, and so I thought I might borrow your body for a bit.
Yu Zhitong replied awkwardly.
Heng, I'm afraid that's not the reason why you attacked. I think that you had it all planned out from the beginning.
Yu Zhitong, I bet that when you were first explained the process of body possession to Dr. Mo, you didn't have any good intentions and therefore didn't bother to mention that the success rate of body possession was directly correlated to the strength difference. Do you know what I think? I think that you had it all planned out from the beginning. You made Dr. Mo use the self-mutilating 7-soul devouring technique against my 4th level cultivation of the Eternal Spring Arts, which are near equal in terms of power, so that we would both become exhausted to the point of perishing together. After the battle came to a draw, you would then step in and reap the benefits of Dr. Mo's painstaking work and ultimately take over my body. Did I guess correctly, Cultivator Yu?
Han Li calmly stated his assumptions in the time it takes for several breaths. After a long moment of silence, Yu Zhitong let out a sigh expressing his dejection.
I originally wanted to give you empty praises, but now I sincerely mean it when I say that you are extraordinarily smart, even outshining your master Mo Juren, that cunning fox. You guessed correctly.
Once finished, his tone suddenly turned prideful.
Ha! That Mo Juren was only a normal mortal, yet he wanted to stand on equal footing with us cultivators. Was he even worthy? Moreover, he dared use such despicable means as to get rid of my cultivating body and still wanted to step onto the path of cultivation. He was simply daydreaming.
The hatred Yu Zhitong had kept bottled in his heart for a long time finally revealed itself.
But you are different. You were born with spiritual roots and intelligence above the norm. Staying in the secular world would be too much of a pity. If you are willing to help me find a new and suitable body, I am willing to act as your guide, introduce you to the elders of my clan, and accept you as my disciple. What do you think?
He thought back to how Dr. Mo hated him, but still ended up working with him and even occasionally tried to get on his good side, believing this would make Yu Zhitong more submissive. Much to Yu Zhitong's disappointment, after Han Li heard his enticing promise, he did not reveal even a hint of excitement, his face remaining as impassive and unmoving as ever.
As for the matter of cooperation, we can discuss that later. Right now, I still have one question that I hope you would provide me with a clear answer.
If I answer this question of yours, then you will be willing to cooperate with me?
That depends on your answer, and if it is to my satisfaction.
Okay, ask away. Yu Zhitong promised immediately and demonstrated his understanding of the concept that one must learn how to yield under pressure.
Han Li did not immediately answer, but instead raised his head up to the ceiling in a contemplative manner, as if he were thinking deeply about how he should phrase the question. Seeing Han Li's solemn face, Yu Zhitong couldn't help but feel a sense of fear creep up within his heart, as he himself wondered what kind of headache-inducing question Han Li would ask him.
I want to know if there are any negative side effects from devouring Dr. Mo and a portion of your own soul, because I currently feel a pain in my head, almost as if it's being filled to the point of exploding with information that I am unable to recognize,
said Han Li, finally mentioning the one worry he had since he had woken up. After listening this question, and realizing that Han Li was worried about such a small problem, Yu Zhitong immediately felt unease in his heart dissipate, and even his voice lightened up.
Hehe. So you were worried about this. Well, little brother, you worry too much. In fact, you don't need to put this matter at heart. If you really want to know, the information you feel stuffed into your brain will slowly disappear within a year or two, so you have absolutely nothing to worry about.
So what you are saying is that the things I swallowed are absolutely useless, and that I am completely unable to hold on to them. I don't trust you on this.
Han Li said coldly as he glared at the Yu Zhitong with traces of suspicion evident on his face.
Saying that you can't even hold on to a bit of it is not actually true, but what you can hold on to is indeed only a small portion of it.
Yu Zhitong quickly added onto his explanation out of fear that Han Li would misunderstand something.
For example, you will be unable to touch the included memories, experiences, and emotions, and even if you did absorb them, there is a high chance that you will instantly become mentally crippled. Your personality will develop split versions of itself. Your consciousness will collapse, and your brain will ultimately burst, leading to your death.
You have to understand that the soul is the most precious thing a person can possess. How can it be so easily combined with other things?
It is true that you can absorb someone else's soul and have it temporarily rest in your subconscious, but to make it your own is simply wishful thinking.
Otherwise, if a simple body possession can allow you to absorb all of one's memories, experiences, chi techniques, then wouldn't that cause the whole world to fall into chaos?
If things were that simple, then who would honestly practice cultivation along with going out and exploring the different realms of this world, when they could obtain all this through simply possessing someone else's body?
Once a soul has been consumed, the only thing that can be used is a little bit of the energy the devoured soul has left, which could then be used to bolster one's own reservoir of energy for a short amount of time. It's due to the fact that this type of energy escapes the fastest, staying within the body for only a few days before it dissipated along with the devoured soul. Once it's gone, you will be unable to use it.
As Han Li continued to listen to Yu Zhetong's explanation, he slowly put down the last strand of doubt he carried within his heart, because he could tell from Yu Zhetong's tone that he was not lying. After all, it became increasingly obvious that Yu Zhetong was seeking out a similar cooperation with Han Li, similar to the one that he had with Mo Juren. He knew that Han Li was testing him, so he did not dare to lie. When Yu Zhetong finished the last sentence of his explanation, he saw Han Li nod his head and couldn't help but feel a sense of relief as he knew that Han Li believed him. At the same time that Yu Zhetong brightened up a bit, he asked hurriedly,
Little brother Han, it seems like you are satisfied with the answer I provided. So don't you think that now would be a good time to discuss our terms of cooperation?
Of course, being able to work with a cultivator is my utmost pleasure.
Han Li said in a sincere tone, flashing a big smile that revealed his white teeth that gleamed in the candlelight.
Really?
Yu Zhetong asked excitedly in disbelief, as he did not even have to try to persuade Han Li, who agreed all by himself.
Of course, Han Li answered crisply.
Then he pulled something out of his clothes and said to Yu Zhetong in a familiar tone,
Now that we are partners, you wouldn't mind doing a small test for me before we discuss any further, right?
Test?
Yu Zhetong paused for a moment before looking at the familiar-looking cylindrical object in Han Li's hand, while a bad feeling crept back into his heart.
That correct? More specifically, a poison test.
Han Li uttered these words as he lifted up the cylinder-shaped object before moving his thumb a little, which then caused some black liquid carrying a rancid smell to shoot out straight towards its target. Yu Zhetong emitted a sharp and painful scream as the black liquid covered the whole green globe of light. The green globe dimmed significantly, showing that the injury he had received was not light.
You dare attack me, to poison me?
Yu Zhetong screamed hoarsely, still in disbelief as he was unable to accept the event that just transpired. Han Li did not pay attention to Yu Zhetong's angry shouts and instead reached for the dagger located on his belt just above his abdomen. He then swiftly unsheathed it with a
shua,
revealing a shiny blade. The dagger was one of those rarely seen,
Jade daggers.
which had blades that were incomparably flexible. The dagger in question was as wide as a knuckle and about half a meter long. Han Li only obtained this double-edged dagger by paying large amounts of money in order to get the blacksmith to custom make it according to Han Li's specifications. Since Han Li did not specialize in weapons, he did not have an opportunity to bring out this dagger during the struggle with Dr. Mo, but it seemed like the time has come for him to use it. Previously, Han Li had kept this weapon hidden on his body and almost didn't have an opportunity to use it. His face darkened and his original smile disappeared by half the thought of almost not being able to use the dagger that he paid a large amount of money to obtain. He looked at the trembling ball of light with apathy and, without saying a word, took a flying step forward as he savagely hacked at the green globe, as if he were chopping a block of wood. Every time it thought it could escape, the dark liquid would force it back to its corner, causing it to be constantly weakened. Even though his soul grew weaker because of Han Li's repeated attempts at trying to cut him with his dagger, what really made him despair was the mysterious black liquid that was corroding his soul. Since the moment the black liquid touched his soul, Yu Zhetong had felt his life essence trickle away, feeble and powerless. It also tore away at the little magic power he had left, which was even deadlier. This prevented Yu Zhetong from performing magic, causing his casted magic techniques to fail repeatedly. It was as if he were completely restricted. Faced with Han Li's ruthless attacks, The ball of light that was Yu Zhitong released a howl filled with anguish. But Han Li did not care about Yu Zhitong's unwillingness to die.
Why are you trying to kill me? Why?
Not long after, Yu Zhitong became quieter as he gradually weakened until he was finally unable to emit a sound or show a hint of movement. Seeing Yu Zhitong's stillness, Han Li did not immediately stop his attack. Instead, he continued to observe the ball of light, which had dimmed until it resembled the weak flame of a candle. After a while, Han Li gave a cold answer.
I would never believe you. A person so despicable that you would easily and willingly swear a poisonous oath that condemned your family and ancestors to a gruesome death under heaven's wrath. If I did work with you, then I would following Dr. Mo to his death.
With a chilling glare, he gave Yu Zhitong's flickering soul one last glance before turning around, and without hesitation, he swiftly pushed open the heavy door. With the door thrown open, a few sharp rays of sunlight shot inside and landed on the globe of light. Upon contact with the dying soul, the sunlight burned Yu Zhitong's last remaining soul force, causing it to turn into a curl of smoke that promptly disappeared into the air with a
Pooh.
With this, the last of trace of Yu Zhitong was cleanly wiped away from this world by Han Li. To say that Han Li knew that Yu Zhitong feared the light was not exactly true. He first thought of this idea when he recalled how Mo Juren, upon entering the room, quickly blew out several candles. If he did not remember this event, then he would still be hacking at the globe of light to no avail, causing an immeasurable worry to arise in his heart. Although Han Li had eliminated Yu Zhitong's life essence with ease, he had prepared an extra tube of 7 poison water in advance in case his plan didn't work. Compared to the 5 poison water, which Mo Juren took away from him, this second tube contained extra ingredients that greatly increased its potency. One of the added materials was the flowered mushroom, which was extremely deadly to normal mortals, and even more effective against immortal cultivators. The effect of its potency could be seen in how Yu Zhitong was unable to use magic, allowing his soul to be easily destroyed. This was the reason why Han Li splashed some 7 poison water on Yu Zhitong's soul. From his research of a variety of legends, there was a visible trend that ghosts, monsters, demons, and the like are afraid of chicken blood, black dog blood, and other similar bodily fluids. So in this case, Han Li treated Yu Zhitong as a ghost. By guessing randomly and through pure coincidence did Han Li manage to kill Yu Zhitong. If Yu Zhitong knew that his death was based on speculation, he would have died again from vomiting. Han Li was not clear about all the effects of his 7 water poison, but he was certain that when he opened the door, Yu Zhitong would die without fail, and it was only with this fact reassuring him that he acted so mercilessly and ruthlessly. Now he was finally free, and did not have to live a life of constant worry about a knife placed at his throat, nor did he have to be ready to flee at a moment's notice. Han Li calmly strode back to the center of the stone room where he stayed for a moment, before he suddenly jumped up a good 3 meters and opened his mouth to shout out his heart's joys.
I'm finally free. I am finally free. I am.
Han Li's voice was suddenly cut short, almost as if a knife had swiftly descended on him, when he saw the giant man standing in the doorway to the stone room. It was the giant man whom Mo Juren referred to as
Iron Slave.
Han Li's face immediately became ugly and unsightly as he stared at the giant figure in front of him. He suddenly felt his shoulders ache as he realized that he had committed a huge mistake. He had forgotten about the giant man's existence, and therefore forgot to ask Yu Zhitong about the Mo Jurens and the giant man's relationship along with his weakness. The only consolation Han Li had was the fact that the giant man did not show any interest in the stone room and continued to wander around the premise of the door, still following Mo Juren's final command without throwing a single glance into the open room. Han Li couldn't help but furrow his eyebrow as he thought that the Iron Slave was the hardest type of person to deal with, since it did not listen to reason or persuasion and would only follow orders given by its master. The other problem was that if Han Li couldn't defeat him in battle, and the only thing that stood a chance of winning was the poison he concocted. However, the cylinder that once held the poison now lay empty on the floor. This thought caused Han Li to pace back and forth in the stone room, scrambling to think of a plan to deal with the Iron Slave. But after a lot of thinking, his mind was in a mess, and he still did not have a plan. Inadvertently, Han Li's gaze fell upon Mo Juren's dead body. Suddenly, he had an idea.
Maybe I can find something on his body that can be used to restrain the Iron Slave.
Han Li immediately thought. He quickly glanced outside and saw that the Iron Slave was still pacing back and forth with no signs of tiredness or an intent to go near the stone room. Seeing this, Han Li calmed down a bit as he quickly walked up to Mo Juren's body and shamelessly stretched out both of Dr. Mo's arms to begin carefully examining every inch of his dead corpse. Some were items that he recognized while others were foreign to him. He sorted these objects in 2 piles that he placed next to him. While sorting out all the objects, Han Li had a fair share of surprises, causing him to exclaim a few times. The amount of objects Mo Juren carried on his self was not small, and some were even dangerous and life-threatening objects. A tube of some mysterious poison, a bag of sand dipped in lethal snake venom, 10 or so incredibly sharp boomerangs. As the number of items on the floor increased, the more panicked and unsettled Han Li became. He realized how lucky he had been when battling against Mo Juren. If the other had not wanted to capture him alive, Han Li would have most likely died. After wiping away the cold sweat from his face, Han Li laughed mockingly to himself.
Me, a living man, is afraid of a dead man's possessions.
After removing all the items from Mo Juren's body, he started to carefully sift through all the suspicious-looking items.
This small bottle is so foul-smelling, but it must be some kind of antidote, so it should be okay. This weird-looking weapon looks oddly similar to a wheel, and even though I don't know what it's used for, it shouldn't be related to the Iron Slave, so I'll first put it to the side. As for this spice bag,
Han Li continued to fiddle and inspect each item while talking aloud to himself, making it seem as if he was in high spirits, when suddenly he found himself holding a small bag. Within his hands was a normal-looking spice bag that, under normal circumstances, would not catch the eyes of others. However, Han Li knew that since it was on Mo Juren's body, it would not be anything but simple. Han Li weighed the small spice bag in his hands in hopes of gaining insight on its contents, but he only noticed that the bag was exceedingly light and could not possibly contain anything heavy. After weighing it for a second time, he felt that there might be a paper-like object, or something similar, hidden within the small bag. Han Li prepared himself mentally before opening the bag, and just as he expected, he saw several sheets of paper tucked inside. He glanced at the paper and noticed that it was written in Mo Juren's handwriting, which caused a heavy feeling to weigh down his heart. After briefly skimming the paper, he did a double take as he reread the note and realized that it was Mo Juren's personal will. Han Li felt bewildered, and due to his curiosity, he carefully read the contents on the few pieces of paper. After he finished reading, Han Li lifted his head upward and stared for a long time before releasing a heavy sigh. Furrowing his brows, he felt an extremely heavy weight descend over his heart. With his hands clasped together on the back of his head, he looked like an old man as he paced aimlessly. He would first walk 2 steps, then stop and ponder upon something. After realizing he couldn't fully grasp his thought, he would continue to pace a few steps before stopping once again to think. Just like this, Han Li continued to pace around, mimicking a donkey circling around Mo Juren's body. His face became unsettled. One moment it was bright red, and the next it would turn white, showing the raging emotions he felt within himself, unable to be pacified. If Li Feiyu saw Han Li's unstable mindset, he would probably mock him with loud ridicule. The reason for Han Li's change was Mo Juren's will, which left behind some extremely terrible news that left him with one of 2 difficult choices. Within the antidote for insect corpse pill that Mo Juren had previously given him was a rare type of poison that could only be removed by his family's precious warm yang jade. Apart from this treasure, even legendary antidotes could not save him. Written on the few sheets of paper, Mo Juren's will clearly stated that the poison he used on Han Li was for the worst-case scenario, that Mo Juren would die from failing to possess Han Li. So, in preparation of any unsettled business he might have after his death, he decided to include one final, simple exchange with Han Li in his will, allowing Han Li and the deceased doctor to benefit greatly. Mo Juren would be able to take care of any unsettled business, while Han Li would be able to gain a large amount of wealth and an indescribable amount of benefits. As for whether Yu Zhitong would be the last one alive, Mo Juren did not give it a second thought. He only briefly mentioned him in his will, saying that Yu Zhitong was weak by nature and afraid of death, and although he was a bit smart, that was the extent of his current capabilities. Mo Juren also mentioned that even though Yu Zhitong was an immortal cultivator, he would never become anything great, and for this reason he was quickly disregarded as being the last person alive. Once Han Li saw this, he laughed bitterly in his heart at how Mo Juren did not predict that, in the end, he would fall into the trap of the innocent-looking Yu Zhitong. If Han Li had not hid his real eternal spring arts cultivation level, he would most likely have ended up like Mo Juren, allowing Yu Zhitong to receive all the benefits. Of course, Mo Juren had also planned to achieve his fantasies of becoming an immortal cultivator by taking over Han Li's body. It seemed like no matter what kind of cultivator one became, one must not underestimate others. In his will, the trade Mo Juren proposed was very simple. He wrote that in a year or two, the poison would become effective. To remove this poison, Han Li must make a trip to Mo Juren's home. Mo Juren had wives and daughters, along with a decently sized business. He had made arrangements for them before he left, but he feared that if he were absent for an extended period of time, his enemies would have evil intent against his family. For this reason, Han Li must rush to protect his wives and family members before the situation escalated, and preferably help them escape from the bloody world, that is Jianghu, so that they can live a normal life without want. As a way of compensating and removing any of Han Li's suspicions, Mo Juren's will betrothed one of his daughters to him and gave him a dowry of 1/2 of all his assets, along with the Yang jaded treasure. Before Mo Juren left, he had given the precious jade to his wives for safekeeping, and also explicitly told them that it was to be used as part of their daughter's dowry. So even if Han Li did not want to wed his daughter, he would be forced to. Of course, Mo Juren clearly pointed out that his enemies' clans were very large and influential. They also contained many cultivators. The sheer number of members made it hard for the clans to supervise and control all of their members. And with Han Li's current abilities, he wouldn't be capable of dealing with them head-on. For this reason, he specifically prepared 2 false identities for Han Li and carefully hid them in a secret location unknown to anyone besides Mo Juren. Furthermore, he even left behind a token belonging to Mo Juren and a handwritten letter. At the same time, he also left a list of names that clearly stated his trusted aides, those he suspected of plotting against him, and the names of his enemy clans within his letter. He also wrote out several things Han Li must take note of. Finally, to express the sincerity of his will, he even left behind how to control and summon the Iron Slave and the cloud-winged bird. What caught Han Li's attention was how Mo Juren vaguely pointed out the fact that the Iron Slave was actually a soulless corpse whose soul has already entered the cycle of reincarnation, as if to make him not feel unwell. These words caused Han Li to be at a loss. Did he really seem to be of the overly emotional sort? However, even without mentioning the poison within his body, when Han Li was faced with such great riches, he had felt rather tempted. Han Li had always been sensitive to money, and was therefore very interested in Mo Juren's proposal. As for the betrothal to Mo Juren's daughter, Han Li felt an odd feeling well up within himself. He was around the age when he would experience his first set of romantic thoughts. Furthermore, he knew from Mo Juren's original appearance that his daughter could not be anything but beautiful. But the risk he faced was no small matter. If he was not careful, he might end up having to pay with his life. Mo Juren's enemies are not simple characters. Mo Juren had carefully constructed a watertight plan to take care of any unsettled business, using the chance to start a new life filled with beautiful women and immense wealth as a collective incentive in order to tie Han Li to Mo Juren's family, effectively mixing safety and danger together by forcing Han Li to swallow this honey-wrapped poison pill.
Should I accept Dr. Mo's deal right now, or should I wait? I'm absolutely sure there is no cure before making my decision.
Han Li was helpless, unable to come to a conclusion. Then, he looked outside at the Iron Slave and thought back at the unintelligible chant left behind at the end of Mo Juren's will. A sense of curiosity rose within his heart as he prepared the steps to control the Iron Slave. Han Li bent down and retrieved from within the pile of items a brass bell small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. The brass bell was delicately crafted with harmonious proportions that made it look pleasing to the eyes. With one glance, he could tell that it was the work of a skilled artisan. The only difference this bell had from an ordinary one was the bell frame, which had faint traces of bloodstains, making it particularly eye-catching. Han Li carefully inspected all the features of this so-called
soul-guiding bell.
From its surface, he was unable to see what was so special about it. But by following Mo Juren's instructions, he could control the frightening Iron Slave. Such an object was inconceivable. Han Li held onto the small bell with his left hand and a dagger with his right hand. Slowly and cautiously, he walked out past the stone door and approached the Iron Slave. When he was 20 feet away from the large man, he stopped walking, unwilling to move any further. If he moved even 1 foot closer, he might not be able to protect himself from any accidents. At this moment, the Iron Slave was standing straight with his back, face towards Han Li. Dang! A crisp and clear sound rang out from the bell after Han Li used his dagger to softly hit the copper bell. Han Li briefly wrinkled his eyebrows. The sound was the same as that of a normal clock, so how could it possibly control the Iron Slave? His heart wavered slightly. His body shrank down a little as he prepared himself to run back to the stone room at the first signs of failure. Hearing the ringing from the bell, the Iron Slave's shoulder shook almost imperceptibly. Seeing this reaction, Han Li felt delighted, and he quickly continued to strike the bell. Dang, dang. The bells sounded out in quick succession, and the Iron Slave's body shuddered accordingly until even his walking became staggered, unable to stand firmly, causing him to finally fall face down on the ground, unconscious. The Iron Slave's immense body, upon impact with the ground, unsettled a large amount of dust that caused the unprepared Han Li to sneeze consecutively, making him look battered and dirtied. But at this time, Han Li could care less about his appearance. He quickly pounced on the Iron Slave and reached his hands out to tear away his cloak, revealing a bloated face that shocked and absolutely horrified Han Li. Han Li forcefully endured the uncomfortable feeling within his heart, unwilling to continue to inspect the Iron Slave anymore. Using his dagger to lightly cut open his own wrist, Han Li allowed some of his blood to flow out unobstructed, dripping onto the Iron Slave's face, until his face was completely smeared with blood before Han Li found a clean strip of clothing to tie around his wrist in order to prevent further bleeding. Then he calmly stood to the side to watch the Iron Slave's reaction. Then, strangely enough, all the blood on the Iron Slave's face slowly sank into his skin without a single drop left behind, causing Han Li, who was watching off to the side, to be dumbstruck to the point where he was oblivious to the fact that he exerted too much pressure on the wound, causing fresh blood to seep out of underneath the cloth. Once the blood was completely absorbed, the Iron Slave opened both eyes and slowly got up. He looked incapable of speech. Both his eyes seemed lifeless, without a trace of emotion. But when the Iron Slave turned his head to look at Han Li and their eyes made contact, Han Li heard a
Wang sound within his mind.
A strangely foreign yet familiar feeling arose within Han Li's heart, almost as if something foreign suddenly appeared within his heart. This feeling was like a pet he personally raised, constantly revolving around Han Li, longing for its name to be called out. Han Li was surprised but immediately calmed down because he saw that the Iron Slave's once rigid and deadpan face was now filled with complete obedience. Seeing this gave Han Li the feeling that he was able to control the Iron Slave's fate. It was a fascinating and novel feeling. Han Li suppressed his pleasant surprise and calmly gave the large man a command to test his limits.
Go and tear that stone wall for me.
Without saying a single word, the Iron Slave walked over to the stone door with a few large strides, raised his two fists together above his head like a large hammer, and with 3 to 5 strokes smashed apart the door. As swift as a wind, he returned to Han Li's side, awaiting his next command. Han Li, who had been downcast from reading Mo Juren's will, could not resist any more and grinned widely from ear to ear. With this strong helper always waiting for orders, would there be any normal dangers in the future capable of harming him? Han Li was thinking about his wonderful future while he fervently sized the giant man from head to toe. The more he looked at the giant man, the happier he felt. His originally ugly view of the man now seemed more pleasing to the eye, even going as resembling a familiar face to Han Li.
A familiar face?
Han Li was both frightened and shocked by his own realization. How could he think that this ugly face looked familiar when it was his first time seeing it? Faced with these questions, Han Li started to closely investigate the giant man's nose and eyes in an attempt to find the answer. Gradually, he discovered that if he were to take the giant man's bloated face and shrink it to its original size, this face would not be considered ugly to look at. In fact, the Iron Slave's face would even look honest and straightforward, giving Han Li a sight he found both familiar and horrifying. Han Li's face turned pale. After half a day of silence, he reached out both hands to gently touch the giant man's face.
Brother Zhang, is that really you?
His words sounded downcast, making him appear to be tranquil. The face he had pieced together was remarkably similar to that of his good friend,
Zhang Tai.
Thinking back to Dr. Mo's last few ineffable words, Han Li was completely sure that the giant man and Zhang Ti were somehow closely related. Was it really as it was described in the letter? If the giant man was made from Zhang Ti's empty body, then his soul was already long gone. But how did his body become so huge and frightening? Within his heart, he was trying to guess all the bitter experiences Zhang Ti had experienced. Dr. Mo had most likely colluded with Yu Zhetong to kidnap Zhang Ti, a way of the armored elephant practitioner, giving the false pretense that he left and tricking the numerous eyes and ears within the Seven Mysteries sect. Then, they secretly used some kind of magic technique to remove Zhang Ti's soul, causing his body to become as grotesque as it was now. The effects of their technique were similar to that of the backlash from cultivating the way of the armored elephant. Han Li's guess was not very different from what had actually transpired. After administering his test, Dr. Mo suddenly had the idea of combining the way of the armored elephant with Yu Zhitong's corpse refining technique to create a group of subservient and powerful puppets that could sweep across Jianghu. However, he was only able to create this one soldier who Dr. Mo treated as his treasure. He usually kept the Iron Giant hidden somewhere at the bottom of the mountains, and the only time Dr. Mo took the Iron Giant out of hiding was when he returned to the mountain. But Yu Zhitong was not the least bit interested in this dubious reanimated corpse. In fact, he even snorted disdainfully, because when he still had his body, he had been capable of using qi to deal with these kinds of reanimated corpses without much difficulty. In addition, this animated corpse was incomparable to the high-ranked reanimated corpses of cultivators. As a result, it was only useful in the mortal word. The only positive side was that the materials were easier to gather, the process of refining was simpler, and anyone with a little bit of internal qi could use this technique. After a while, Han Li removed his hand from the giant man's face and turned his unsettled eyes away from his body. His gaze landed upon the destroyed stone door, his mind still in a daze. In that moment, he felt his heart grow cold, not because of Zhang Ti's situation, but rather because of his own cold and detached attitude. He originally thought that when he found out about his friend's miserable downfall, he would furiously lift his head up and shout out,
Mo Juren, Yu Zhitong.
But in actuality, aside from some sadness, his discovery did not stir up any fury. Almost as if the one who fell under these circumstances was not his good friend Zhang Ti, but rather a stranger who was not related to him in any way. Was it because he knew that the Zhang Ti in front of him was only an empty shell and not the Zhang Ti he once knew? Or was it because his heart had become too cold? Han Li's cold and detached behavior caused fear to manifest in his heart. He realized right then that he had changed too much to the point where he was foreign to himself. Han Li finally awoke from his stupor and looked at the giant man with eyes filled with turmoil, unsure of how to address
him. Thinking of what Dr. Mo said about a lost soul, walking corpse. Brother Zhang, I imagine you have moved on to the next life, so you have no need for your body. Please allow your little brother to use it. I will definitely be careful, and I hope that you will not blame me for my actions.
After saying a few words and finding peace, Han Li faced the giant man and said,
Since you are the body Brother Zhang left behind and don't have an independent soul of your own, I will call you Crooked Soul. I hope you can provide me with a helping hand in the future.
Learning to Han Li's words, the giant man stood there stupidly without moving, and aside from looking tame and obedient, there were no hints of reaction. It seemed like he really lacked a consciousness and could only be commanded into action.
I can't believe I'm saying these words to body that can't even think for itself. This is so silly.
Han Li mockingly, he shook his head and lightly strolled inside the stone room.
Crooked Soul, keep up.
Once Han Li recovered from his downcast state, his expression returned to normal as if he had never been dejected at all. The truth indeed reflected his guess. He had become abnormally cold-hearted and rational, not able to be easily disturbed by his own emotions. Han Li, who was about to step onto the path of cultivation, was unsure of whether this outstanding change would be a source of great calamity or great fortune. For a short time afterwards, Han Li spent a good half-day in order to deal with the aftermath of the situation.
Crooked Soul, let's go. We still have several matters to take care of tomorrow. It's a pity you don't have a conscience and can't open your mouth to talk. Otherwise, I would have someone I can discuss with, which would help make things proceed more smoothly.
Under the illumination of the setting sun's fiery red glow, Han Li dragged along a slender and tall shadow. While walking, Han Li constantly talked to the giant man, whom he referred to as Crooked Soul. At last he found a companion to whom he could confide in without the fear of being complained against. Crooked Soul's expression was cold and detached, making him similar to that of the leader of a neighborhood gang. After arranging a hiding place for Crooked Soul, Han Li returned to his own dwelling. Once inside his house, he acted like a man who hasn't returned back home in a long time, touching and rubbing the chairs and tables, looking everywhere, and talking to himself.
Today was an extremely long day. It seems like this day was longer than the first 10 years of my life.
Abandoning all of his worries, he came crashing down on his bed, covered his head with his pillow, and began falling asleep. He was very tired. He could not bear the mental and physical exhaustion.
But being able to live is truly wonderful.
He couldn't help thinking this, and as he entered into sleep, the corner of his lips lifted up in a slight smile. The contents were indeed from one of the volumes of the Eternal Spring Arts incantation. He read it with keen interest, engrossed by its contents. Dr. Mo often held this book in his hands, reading it countless times without growing sick of it. This abnormal situation used to puzzle Han Li. But today he found out the reason behind Dr. Mo's strange action, which helped him understand that the doctor had not been looking for some method to maintaining his health, but rather he was trying to hardest to comprehend the Eternal Spring Arts incantation. Dr. Mo had been unwilling to give up on his own inability to cultivate magic power. Instead of placing his complete faith in Yu Jitong's promises regarding spiritual roots, Mo Juren had continued to persist in his attempts to understand the Eternal Spring Arts. Han Li discovered this secret volume in a secret compartment, along with several other items. The book not only contained the first 6 layers of the chant he had cultivated, but also another 2 layers that he has never seen before. This unexpected discovery caused Han Li to feel greatly excited. Once Han Li knew that he was cultivating a legendary technique that could call the wind and summon the rain, his thirst for cultivation grew. After all, who doesn't want to be an immortal deity? When the sun was precisely in the middle of the sky, warm rays shone down through the broad skylight and landed on Han Li, who was reading comfortably, causing him to squint his eyes into thin cracks. Han Li slightly lifted up his head to look at the skylight and felt that it was slightly dazzling. He conveniently used the open book to cover his face and block the shining light of the sun. Once he felt the blackness in front of his eyes, his heart felt more comfortable as he once again silently committed the 7th layer of the chant to memory. He recently discovered that due to his continued use of medicinal assistance, he was about to reach a breakthrough in the Eternal Spring Arts into the 7th layer. The earlier he understood the next few layers, the more beneficial it would be for him when he broke through the bottleneck. More than half-year passed since the day Dr. Mo tried to forcibly seize his body. 2 days after the event, in order to cover up Dr. Mo's death, Han Li personally wrote a letter imitating Dr. Mo's handwriting, saying that he wanted to return to his hometown to visit his family. Using Dr. Mo's name, he passed on this letter to one of the sect's senior disciples. Within the letter, he shamelessly used Dr. Mo's tone of voice, claiming that Han Li had succeeded all of Dr. Mo's medicinal expertise, and that he could substitute him in seeing and treating patients while Dr. Mo was on his long journey. The fake Dr. Mo was unsure of when he would be back, and so in the letter, he also requested the help of several sect members to temporarily look after his duties until he returned to the 7 Mysteries sect. After handing in the letter, several sect elders clearly did not show any hints of doubt since Dr. Mo often left the mountain for months on end in order to gather herbs. In addition, Dr. Mo had a respected position within the 7 Mysteries sect, and was venerated for saving Patriarch Wang's life, so he was free to do as he liked. But several sect elders expressed differing opinions concerning the letter's content about how Han Li has succeeded all of Dr. Mo's medicinal expertise, half believing it while the other half doubted the validity of the letter. Although most of his patients were sect disciples with small cases of fevers, knife wounds, and the like, Dr. Mo's main responsibility was to treat the division heads, elders, and other high-ranking figures. The majority of the other disciples had to find one of the other few doctors on the mountaintop for treatment. Thus, at first, several senior members did not immediately allow Han Li to take up Dr. Mo's responsibilities. They first made Han Li treat some disciples in order to test his abilities. Han Li was not the least bit bothered by other people's doubts regarding his medicinal abilities, and he carried an indifferent attitude for all those he treated. The only reason he proposed to take up Dr. Mo's job was because he fancied the God Hand Valley and its decent medicinal garden. If he could continue to stay within the mountain valley and let everyone in the mountain valley fall under his control, he would be able to freely use his secret jade bottle in the mountain valley to speed up the growth of rare herbs without fear of other people discovering his secret. Also, even though this small mountain valley was currently inhabited by one person, if Dr. Mo did not come back after a period of time, the division heads or elders might take back the valley on a whim. As a result, in order to demonstrate his medicinal prowess, Han Li expended large amounts of energy to treat the throngs of disciples who came to look for aid and secretly use the rare herbs whose growth he increased every day. Thus, his medicinal knowledge coupled with his magnanimous use of rare and precious herbs caused those who came to receive medical treatment to believe his ability to create miracles after eating medicine that immediately cured their ailments. As he predicted, word of his medical ability that was claimed to be able to bring back the dead spread like a loud thunderclap on a clear day, rapidly causing a sensation throughout the whole 7 Mysteries sect. Everyone on the mountain knew that within their ranks existed a young, talented medicinal god. This medicinal god's abilities were so profound that they were unmeasurable. Under his rescue and medical attention, regardless of whether it was external injuries, internal injuries, or any other miscellaneous or deadly injuries, the most he needed 3 days to return a patient to full health. Compared to Dr. Mo's medicinal abilities, Han Li's prowess seemed to soar with great success. In reality, Han Li's medicinal abilities were more lacking than Dr. Mo's, except Dr. Mo would have never squandered so many precious herbs, so he was far surpassed by Han Li when measuring the length of recovery. Han Li once again helped a seriously injured disciple recover back to full health in a few days. Seeing Han Li's feats, the high-ranking figures could not sit any longer. Barely 1 day passed before they sent someone to invite him over. This time, the person who wanted to meet him was unexpectedly someone he had met before. It was the sect leader Ma, who Han Li had met at Bone Refining Cliff. Note: Sect leader Ma appears in Chapter 5 after the inner disciples' examinations ended. This sect leader Ma had clearly long forgotten Han Li, a nondescript unofficial disciple. Thus, when he met Han Li, he clearly expressed his wish to allow Han Li to take over Dr. Mo's job. Furthermore, Han Li could enjoy all of Dr. Mo's benefits. Of course, Dr. Mo's venerated position could not be given to him yet because Han Li was still too young. At 17 years old, Han Li could not cause others to worship him. But then again, his official monthly salary depended on his position. In the end, sect leader Ma even expressed how if there are anything Han Li was dissatisfied with, he could bring it up and they would take care of it accordingly. With the sect's help, his anticipated objective could be easily reached. But then again, this kind of generous treatment was not often seen in the entire Seven Mysteries sect. It was obvious that the leaders of the sect were fully aware of the importance a highly talented medicinal god had for cultivators in Jianghu. As a result, Han Li did not hold back and asked that God Hand Valley would be handed over to be his personal residence. He claimed that he did not want outsiders to disturb him in the valley while he researched and studied the art of healing. This condition was not one that was naturally accepted by sect leader Ma. The sect leader probably wanted to rope in Han Li and unexpectedly took the initiative to offer Han Li a young and pretty maid to serve his daily needs. Han Li, suddenly faced with this unexpected bargaining chip, felt his heartbeat quicken, and just as he was about to tacitly agree, he calmed down and thought of all the secrets he was hiding. Feeling a bit distressed, Han Li rejected the offer. Han Li's action caused the sect leader Ma to show considerable admiration and to view him in a new light. He continued to compliment Han Li, saying that at such a young age, Han Li was quite handsome, and that if sect leader Ma had a daughter, he would marry her to Han Li. Han Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry at these words, because it wasn't that he rejected feminine charm, but that he couldn't afford to at this moment. And just like this, the entire God Hand Valley became Han Li's private territory. Outsiders were not allowed to casually enter. Regarding any visitors, Han Li specifically placed a large clock at the entrance of the valley. It didn't matter who wanted to meet Han Li, they just needed to strike the clock, and Han Li would promptly exit the valley to meet them. This eccentric rule was written in bold characters next to the clock. Even a few of the middle to upper rank members could not avoid this rule. The reason why Han Li laid down this eccentric rule was to completely prevent any last possibility of the secret of his bottle from leaking out. As long as no one broke into the mountain valley, Han Li could guarantee the bottle's heaven-defying properties from being known by a second party. At first, this rule was not an issue for the lower-ranked disciples, but it caused many high-ranking members to be very dissatisfied. They believed Han Li viewed himself too highly, not knowing how high the sky was or how deep the earth was. Not even Dr. Mo was this haughty, so how could Han Li, a trifling disciple who just finished his apprenticeship, dare to act so presumptuously? But after Han Li saved someone who suffered a heavy and life-threatening wound from the brink of death and aided in his recovery, all signs of complaint disappeared without a trace, and no one brought up the eccentric rule again. No one wanted to offend someone who may save their lives countless times like the medicinal god over a small and trivial matter. They naturally believed that forcing visitors to ring a bell to meet him was a strange habit, unique to temperamental medicinal gods. The following days passed one by one, and even the sect elders gradually followed Han Li's rule. When they wanted to ask for medical help, they would send someone to respectfully sound the big clock to call for Han Li. God Hand Valley's eccentric rule gradually turned Han Li into a legend of sorts in the Seven Mysteries sects. What was ridiculous was that he was not even ranked in the sect. He didn't have a high-ranking position, nor did he hold any position of power. He was still a low-ranking disciple. But then again, who has seen such a popular disciple in the sect? Even the sect elders who came to visit him would address him as Dr. Han. Not many people dared to directly address Han Li by his name. Of course, this did not apply to Li Feiyu, also known to Han Li as Senior Disciple Li. Li Feiyu still maintained his cold and detached disposition in front of others, but every time he saw Han Li, he became sloppy and carefree. His treatment of Han Li had not been changed by his new identity as a medicinal god, unlike Fatty Wang and the other disciples who had drifted apart and became more respectful. There were no traces of politeness whenever Li Feiyu addressed Han Li by his name. This made Han Li feel a bit of gratitude. He still wasn't accustomed to living a life of solitude. Just thinking about Li Feiyu's expression whenever he laughed, Han Li couldn't help but think of another individual's face. Recently, he unexpectedly met someone else who had ridden the same carriage as Han Li up the mountains several years ago. Now an inner sect member of the 7 Supreme Division, Wu Yan had contracted a strange illness that was untreatable by all of the doctors who were sent to treat him, tormenting him to no ends. In the end, he had no choice but to use sect leader Ma's name to ask for Han Li's help to cure his illness. Wu Yan's memory was quite good, and when he met the famous Dr. Han, he recognized with a single glance that he was one of the children who came on the same carriage as him, Han Li. His face revealed a shocked look that was still fresh in Han Li's memory to this day. That year, Wu Yan's attitude towards Han Li was not exceptionally good, even a bit vile. Seeing Wu Yan's awkward appearance, Han Li truly felt like laughing. Normally, he would not treat Wu Yan's illness because of their shared history. But in order to not damage his reputation as a medicinal god, he even increased the amount of prescribed medicine so that Wu Yan would recover from his illness in 2 short days. During the period of recovery, however, the large amount of prescribed medicine made Wu Yan suffer even more pain. This was Han Li's way of lightly reprimanding the previously vile-tempered youth. Han Li was not as magnanimous as he appeared to be. He wouldn't forget a single grudge. Just like this, Han Li slowly replaced Dr. Mo's position on the mountain and was even considered to be 1 tier above Dr. Mo, in God Hand Valley. Han Li would take out the small bottle, put it inside an empty space within the valley, and allowed the mysterious green liquid to form every 7 to 8 days. With the mysterious green liquid, he would hasten the growth of rare and ancient herbs, which he would refine into medicine with the utmost care. Only a small portion of these herbs were used on those who visited him to seek medical aid. The majority of the herbs were taken and used for Han Li's personal use. He would use them to cultivate and refine Yuan Qi, and to push forward in his cultivation of the eternal spring arts. Han Li gently shifted the body within the late Dr. Mo's chair to find a more comfortable position. Although the chair he sat on was indeed Dr. Mo's armchair, this place was not Dr. Mo's house, but rather Han Li's residence. He had taken all the items he thought would be useful from Dr. Mo's house and, with no trace of politeness, claimed them as his own, moving them into his own residence. As for the position in which Han Li was sitting, even if someone saw his disrespectful actions, they would not do anything because in their eyes the current Han Li's worth far exceeded that of Dr. Mo's. People were surprisingly very realistic and practical. Dr. Mo's residence was far bigger than Han Li's, so moving into the bigger house would have been more suitable. Unfortunately, Han Li thought that living there was a bit weird. After all, he was the main cause of Dr. Mo's death. Brazenly living in the house of someone he killed with his own hand would cause his heart to become heavy and cold. As a result, living in his own residence, TL, he calls it his own doghouse, was far more reassuring and comfortable to Han Li. However, whenever he thought of Dr. Mo, Han Li would naturally be unable to forget the sad fact that he was still under the control of a dead person. In the period of time after Dr. Mo's death, he carefully examined his own body, both internally and externally, countless times. He was still unable to refine that thread of cold yin qi hidden within his dantian. Han Li tried to use the pure spirit powder and other famous poison dispelling methods, but sadly none of them were effective. It seemed like the long journey he would have to take in 1 year's time was unavoidable. But not long after, the space half an inch away from his erect fingertips suddenly fluctuated, and several small sparks of fire appeared. When the sparks first appeared, they immediately made a
Zila sound as they twisted and turned in the air to form a walnut-sized ball of red flames.
Although this fireball was not big, a blistering heat emanated from this small ball of fire, permeating the entire room. As Han Li reclined, His face was still covered by his book. He appeared to be asleep, if not for the fact that the small fireball at the tip of his finger continued to release.
Zila! Zila! Sounds of high-temperature combustions.
This, coupled with his unmoving fingertip, made Han Li appear particularly eye-catching. As minutes inched by, the fireball continued to maintain the same vigorous energy, not revealing any hint of being extinguished. However, Han Li eventually shifted. The finger he used to support the fireball started to tremble slightly. The trembling from his finger grew to affect his wrist, then his entire arm. Soon, even his whole body started to tremble. Abruptly, Han Li sat up on the armchair, not even aware that the book had fallen away from his face and onto the ground. His two eyes stared unwaveringly at the fireball on his fingertips, his face red from holding his breath. From his forehead to his neck, his exposed skin revealed many small beads of sweat, appearing as if he had just finished performing some intense exercise that made his body overheat. After a short while, the fireball started to sway alongside Han Li's intense rocking. The floating flame would be large in one moment, then small in the next, unable to maintain a constant state. Not long after, it became small once again. The flame shrank into a spark and dissipated into thin air. Once the fireball disappeared, Han Li felt like a man who had his backbone removed. His fireball had greatly consumed his energy, extremely drained. He reclined his body once more on the chair.
This fireball technique is vexing to train in. Even though I've researched this technique for half a year, I'm still unable to have complete control over it. The most I can manage is extend its duration by a little bit.
Talking to himself, Han Li stared at the ceiling. It turned out that the last few pages of the Eternal Spring Arts book contained several magic techniques. At first glance, it was evident that these were beginner-level techniques for cultivators who just entered the sect. Since all he knew was the Eternal Spring Arts incantation, this made Han Li feel like he obtained a treasure, and for several consecutive nights, he was unable to sleep due to his excitement. Since he had witnessed firsthand Dr. Mo using a few of the magic techniques, it was no surprise that he would be this excited. Han Li had found Dr. Mo's strength terrifying, so he viewed the formidable collection of techniques with great interest. Unfortunately for Han Li, who was currently at the peak of the 6th layer of the Eternal Spring Arts incantation, he was like a beggar holding a golden bowl and asking for alms. Since he was never taught any basic magic technique, he was unable to perform even the simplest spell. But now he suddenly came upon several technique incantations. How could he not be pleased? The final pages of the book had 5 techniques and their respective incantations. They were
Fireball, Soul Lock Talisman, Imperial Flight, Telekinesis, and Heaven's Eye.
To Han Li, all of the techniques and their incantations were still very ancient, profound, and hard to comprehend. This was no surprise since the incantations were composed of words and phrases from an ancient language. Even though he had read quite a few books, he had a very superficial understanding of the ancient texts, so he was unable to immediately grasp certain meanings. Helpless and without a choice, Han Li finally began studying the Eternal Spring Arts, as if his life depending on it, driving straight into piles of different books that were related to old classical languages. He bitterly studied the incantations' meanings every day and night, racking his brain several tens of times over every phrase and every word. Refusing to quit, Han Li was resolved to completely comprehend all of the techniques listed in the book. Even though he had never gone to a school or academy to obtain a formal education, he understood that making a mistake while cultivating boundlessly powerful energy would be more difficult to deal with than an infuriating obsession, and might very well take this small life of his. Thinking of his own personal well-being, Han Li was filled with trepidation and fear, not daring to be even a slight bit careless. After 3 months of intensive research, Han Li finally was able to gain a level of mastery over the theory behind the incantations and apply them. As a result, he was finally starting to truly practice these techniques. However, Han Li's insane method of studying delivered a large mental blow to his enthusiasm and stamina. He had originally planned to rely upon his intelligence, which was enhanced by the Eternal Spring Arts, and thought that learning magic techniques shouldn't be difficult, but who knew that he would suddenly oddly become baffled. He obviously knew the theory behind the techniques, but when it came time to applying them into practice, he could never manage to succeed. No matter what he did, he could not do it right. He did not know whether it was because the spells were wrong, he read the incantations incorrectly, or his magic power was not in the right place. Unable to discover the reason why, Han Li felt extremely slow-witted. Han Li did not know what was causing his failures. but if it was a deficiency in magic power, he would eat another 2 spiritual herbs and the problem would be solved. However, this was a problem that he was unable to wrap his head around. Han Li came to the conclusion that his innate talent for performing celestial arts was not as great as he thought it was. It was only after a long period of bitter training that he finally gained a bit of success in the fireball technique and the heaven's eyes technique. As for the other 3 magic techniques, he did not succeed. He was unable to even reach their initial layers. With great dismay, he could only concentrate on the fireball technique and heaven's eye technique. He placed quite a bit of hope into these 2 celestial arts, since they were the only ones he could comprehend. Among these, the fireball technique's power did not disappoint Han Li. In fact, it greatly surpassed Han Li's expectations. Despite of the fireball technique's small size, it contained a terrifyingly high temperature that could not be underestimated. There was nothing that the fireball technique couldn't burn. Even if the fireball touched a blade made of tempered steel, the area the fireball touched would immediately be melted into liquid steel upon contact. Faced with this inhumanly frightening power, Han Li even threw the fireball into a puddle of water to test it. Upon contact, the reaction of the puddle of water was similar to that of oil, and immediately lit up instead of extinguishing the fireball. After thoroughly understanding the fireball technique's immense power, Han Li finally realized why Yu Zhitong looked down upon mortals with a lofty attitude. Now that Han Li thought about it, a mediocre cultivator who knew a celestial art similar to the fireball technique could easily kill experts in Jianghu. If it was a slightly stronger cultivator, then he could easily sweep across Jianghu, unrivaled under the heavens. The difference in power was simply too immense. It was no wonder that Yu Zhitong looked at normal mortals as if they were insects he could crush underfoot. After executing it, however, Han Li understood that this magic technique was simply a small transfer of energy into one's eyes. There was hardly any difficulty worth mentioning, making it appear as if it were easy to master. However, the heaven's eye technique seemed easy to master because its difficulty was directly proportional to the strength of its target. It grew increasingly more difficult to master it as the target's strength increased. Its functions focused primarily on checking the strength and purity of the magic power belonging to cultivators, making it a useful support-type magic technique. At first, Han Li was exhilarated and used the heaven's eye technique on both of his eyes. He then used his eyes, now filled with magic power, to inspect his own body's condition. Through his enhanced perception, he saw a dim layer of white light permeating his body. The closer he got to his dantian, the more dense the white light became. The white light was his magic power. When Han Li saw this, he couldn't help but extend a hand to touch the white light. However, he felt nothing at all. He noticed that magic power was similar to air. Both were incorporeal and without form, and only through the use of the heaven's eye technique could he hope to inspect it. But after several consecutive inspections, Han Li completely lost all interest in the heaven's eye technique. His loss of interest was due to the fact that he was all alone in the entire Seven Mysteries sect. Who could he use the heaven's eye technique on? He couldn't possibly spend the whole day narcissistically examining himself. Therefore, aside from intensifying his training of the fireball technique, which he hoped to be able to familiarize himself with in order to use it during actual combat, Han Li turned his attention to other types of magic technique that he had yet to learn. He began practicing other magic techniques slowly and in a repetitive manner, hoping for more breakthroughs. Slightly regaining a portion of his body's energy, Han Li could only sigh after thinking about the difficulty of training in other magic techniques. The frequency of his complaints, however, decreased significantly over time as he continued practicing the techniques. Dong, dong. The clock near the valley entrance was sounded, its chime spreading into the valley. Han Li wrinkled his eyebrows. He didn't know why, but recently the amount of people who came for help had suddenly increased. Furthermore, a majority of them had broken hands, broken arms, knife wounds, projectile wounds, and other similar external injuries. He did not dare to neglect his patients because aiding a person is like aiding in putting out a fire. He collected himself and grabbed his medical bag. After exiting his house, Han Li made a beeline for the valley entrance. Outside the valley forest entrance early in the morning, Han Li saw a high-ranking disciple wearing embroidered clothing. The disciple anxiously paced to and fro near the big clock like an ant on a hot pan. Upon seeing Han Li, he immediately hurried towards him.
Dr. Han, please follow me. My master has been poisoned and is on the verge of death. I respectfully ask if you would take a look to see if you can remove the poison from his body.
As this person approached, Han Li realized that the disciple had a familiar face. Having seen him a few times, he realized that the man was Elder Li's most favored disciple, Ma Rong, who had previously come to visit Han Li several times on behalf of his master, Elder Li. Therefore, Ma Rong could almost be considered an acquaintance.
Poisoned?
Han Li asked while immediately walking down the road. As they hurried along, Han Li asking darkly about the details behind Elder Li's misfortune. Han Li was aware that there was some poison that even he himself had no experience with.
Yes. My master got into a fight with a member of the feral wolf gang while traveling down the mountains to take care of some business. In the end, he was not careful and suffered an attack from a dark green seed-looking item. At first, my master was not overly worried and even retaliated by killing his opponent. Who knew that the poison would suddenly take effect on the way back up the mountain, causing him to fall unconscious?
Have you tried to seek the aid of other doctors?
Of course we did. If it was any ordinary poison, then I would not have come to trouble Dr. Han. Those quack doctors, other than knowing that my master suffered from a rare poison, knew nothing else. They did not even dare to prescribe a medicine.
Ma Rong spoke with an extremely dissatisfied face. As Han Li listened, his facial expression did not change. As he hurriedly followed Ma Rong down the path, the only noise he made was "and." Soon, however, doubt arose in his heart. Truthfully, he was not extremely well versed in curing poisons. If it was an internal or external injury, he could depend on several types of medicinal herbs. If he had to treat some rare deadly poison, however, he was not sure that he would be able to provide a solution to the problem. Even though he had the pure spirit powder, an antidote that could cure hundreds of poisons, the world contained an innumerable amount of poisons. Who knew whether the pure spirit power could cure the specific poison that was harming Elder Li? The few local doctors were not completely useless in the healing and dispelling poisons, otherwise they would have been kicked off the mountain by the elders of the Seven Mysteries sect. After all, the sect could not afford to raise a group of incompetent medical disciples who were unable to heal even the smallest of injuries. However, they did not dare to even prescribe a simple prescription, showing that this poison was a troublesome problem that they have never encountered before. Han Li could only survive by having many hidden cards and being able to adapt himself to any situation. Even if he was unable to save Elder Li, it wasn't likely that it would lower his own reputation. After all, there was no medicinal god that could cure every sickness. As Han Li was carefully refining his plan, Ma Rong practically forced Han Li to run lightly while grasping the sleeves of his garment. In this manner, the two hurried towards Elder Li's residence. Seeing him so energetic, Han Li knew that their master-to-disciple relationship was pretty deep. Han Li felt slightly sorrowful because he thought back to his relationship with Dr. Mo. Although they were master and disciples in name, their actual relationship was similar to two enemies. If only their relationship had been as harmonious as the one between Ma Rong and his master. In the depths of his heart, Han Li had always held a form of respect towards Dr. Mo. After all, his medicinal knowledge and eternal spring arts had been imparted to him by the deceased doctor. But sadly, things were not meant to be. The heavens dictated that the two would be unable to live in the same world, forcing them fight an intensive battle in which Dr. Mo died accidentally by Han Li's own hands. Thinking about his past memories, Han Li couldn't help but sigh. Afterwards, Ma Rong brought him to Elder Li's place. Surrounding several houses in close proximity was a 2-meter-high, half-a-meter-thick dirt wall encircling a simple courtyard. Facing the path was an arched half-moon gateway through which Han Li could see that the courtyard was filled with many visitors. Stepping into the courtyard, Han Li realized that the actual number of people was much higher than what he saw from outside the gate. They gathered in groups of 2s or 3s, discussing Elder Li's state in low voices. Han Li had already heard that Elder Li was a good-natured person in the Seven Mysteries sect. Regardless if one was a lower-ranked disciple or an esteemed colleague, he rarely got angry with anyone, nor did he scramble for power and profit in the sect. As a result, many figures in the sect, both the important and the insignificant, had nothing but compliments for the old man, causing his popularity to be very high. Not that Elder Li was suffering from a poison-induced illness. Everyone with high status in the sect would eventually pay their respects either personally or through a representative. Not a single person failed to do so regardless if their reason for coming was heartfelt or hypocritic. As a result, the courtyard soon became filled by a throng of people. Once Han Li came in, he was recognized by the people in the courtyard. the lowest protectors immediately surrounded him, each striving to be the first to greet him.
How are you, medicinal god Han? Dr. Han came.
A wave of well-wishing rang out and continuously battered his ears. Even if he didn't want to hear the endless noise, he had no choice but to endure. Seeing these faces brimming with enthusiasm, Han Li similarly showed a bright smile that did not lose to the crowd in terms of splendor. However, although he appeared to be extremely courteous, he was actually sick of false pleasantries. Fortunately, those with high status, such as the vice sect leaders and consecrated elders, implicitly nodded their heads in Han Li's direction, showing their acknowledgement of his arrival without making a move to approach him. Seeing that they did not make it uncomfortable for Han Li by making him greet them, Han Li had a good impression about these esteemed individuals. Because of Ma Rong's low status, he was unable to anything besides stand to the side with a look of concern. As the protectors tried to get closer to Han Li with their constant stream of pleasantries, Ma Rong's face revealed worry while both of his bands rubbed against each other non-stop. Finally, after Han Li finished greeting the last person, Ma Rong couldn't wait any longer and immediately rushed forward, grabbing Han Li's arm with one hand and charging straight into the house. This rude and impetuous action angered a few people who wished to get on good terms with medicinal god Han, revealing a bit of their displeasure. On the outside, Han Li had a forced smile, but he was actually quite pleased with Ma Rong's decision. This way he could finally get rid of those incessantly annoying people without having to offend anyone. With a sense of urgency, Han Li was pulled into living room by Ma Rong. There were not very many people inside, except a few family members and 2 elders. Sect leader Ma was also there, but what surprised Han Li the most was that Li Feiyu was also inside the room. Han Li was shocked. According to what he knew, there was no relationship between Li Feiyu and Elder Li. So why did he showed here? Just as his stomach was about to burst with questions, Han Li noticed that senior disciple Li was comforting a petite girl with tears flowing down her face. Li Feiyu's highly focused expression was laced with traces of emotion, a look that was very different from the one he usually showed to his fellow disciples. Looking at Li Feiyu's enamored appearance, Han Li suddenly realized what was going on. Startled, he couldn't help but think that it was extremely funny. Han Li promptly and carefully scrutinized the young lady's appearance, wanting to see just what kind of beauty could make Li Feiyu disregard everything for the sake of love. The young lady looked to be around 15 to 16 years of age and was wearing a jasper hairpin. In addition, she wore a lotus green dress, giving the originally sweet and pleasant facial features a naughty and mischievous air. Despite of this, her 2 eyes were swollen red, making her seem lovely yet pathetic. Her dejected appearance gave people an urge to lovingly bring her into a hugging embrace.
Ziz, she really is one fair young lady.
Han Li exclaimed for several moments in his heart, thinking that Li Feiyu falling under this lady's love snare was pardonable. In his heart, there was still a trace of envy and jealousy, not knowing when he himself would also be able to have an intimate companion. Maybe it was because he realized that Han Li was studying this young lady, but Ma Rong was quick to introduce everyone within the house to Han Li in order for him to establish a sense of familiarity. Sect leader Ma and a white-faced elder Qian, whom Han Li had saw before, naturally did not need any introductions, and he immediately took the initiative to step forward to check the body.
Greetings, Sect Leader Ma, Elder Qian.
Sect leader Ma acted as if he were Han Li's close friend, almost as if there was no difference between their status.
Dr. Han is Dr. Han. Why do you have to mention the word young?
Han Li silently cursed within his heart in disagreement with sect leader Ma's phrase. On the other hand, Elder Qian's attitude was cold and detached. He merely nodded his head, acting in complete opposite to sect leader Ma. Han Li was not offended by Elder Qian's indifference, since he knew that Elder Qian practiced a special cultivation method that required him to sever his feelings and desires, causing him to treat everyone with the same cold and indifferent attitude. In addition to sect leader Ma and Elder Qian, there was another tall, sturdy, and red-faced elder with whom Han Li wasn't familiar with. This elder's palms were rough and coarse, and all 10 of his short fingers were thick and solid. From this, it was evident from a single glance that this elder trained in a special martial art.
This is Elder Zhao, my master's close friend. His previously job was to supervise the treasure-gathering division outside the mountain. He just came back 2 days ago.
Ma Rong said while introducing the elder to Han Li. Towards Han Li, Elder Zhao was neither cold nor warm. He made an
and sound with his nose, not saying a word, but the doubt in his eyes was evident.
He clearly didn't trust the invited medicinal god Han's skills due to his young age. Since Elder Zhao didn't seem to have a favorable attitude towards him, Han Li would naturally not take the initiative to fawn over Elder Zhao. Following Elder Zhao's example, Han Li used a flat tone to give his respects, then tried his best to avoid the other person.
Tomorrow I will bring myself together and amend all the unreasonable areas the readers have brought to my attention, so I can only release one chapter today. I hope that the readers will forgive me. I will strive to make this book even more amazing than it currently is. Thank you all for your patience.